Chapter 1789. Translator, Nyoibo, Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio, it almost cost him his life. There were thousands of flames of the way in the world, but there were only 2 or 3 types that Zhang Yin dared not refine. However, he did not think that the flames of the way in Qin Hao's hands could be stronger than hellfire. They were all legendary existences that were almost extinct. Therefore, Zhang Yin was very confident in himself. He was only afraid that Li Chuji's flames of the way would not satisfy him. Seeing Zhang Yan's confident face, Qin Hao smiled faintly and said, "It would be great if you could refine it successfully. It will definitely increase your cultivation level, but what? Don't hesitate. Speak frankly," Zhang Yin said anxiously. Qin Hao said, "What if you can't refine it? It's not your fault. It's my own fault. We'll forget about the divine tree's flames of the way," Zhang Yin replied frankly. "Okay." Qin Hao nodded. Zhang Yin seemed arrogant, but he was reasonable. Then the soul fire in his body surged. The red lotus, will of the way, flowed through his meridians. Qin Hao's body was covered in a layer of dark red flames. The temperature around him rose sharply. The scorching heat gradually suppressed the extremely cold Yu Yuan. Sensing the power of Qin Hao's flames of the way, Samu and Tai Wei were surprised. It seemed to be very powerful. Meng Xiang was also watching carefully. He had fought with Calamity, Sword Emperor before, so he had a deeper understanding of the situation than the others. When Li Chusan released his sword intent, the fire contained in the Emperor's ring was extremely powerful. It could even pierce through Meng Xiang's Emperor intent. Now, Meng Xiang vaguely felt that it was very similar to the legendary Red Lotus. Could it be the Red Lotus, the world's #1 flame, second only to the Dragon King flame? Si Xiang's eyes became sharper. His emperors will seem to enter Qin Hao's emperor's spirit and see the essence of the flames of the way. At this moment, he was greatly shocked. However, he did not say anything or remind Zhang Yin. Zhang Yin did not say anything when Sanmu, Tai Wei, and Lu Kongjin pushed him into the demonic gate to scout. Now, he did not want to interfere. Da Qin and the 3 emperors of the War God Temple were present. Anyway, Zhang Yin would not die. Why should he interfere? Even though he said that Zhang Yin was Li Chuji, Lu Kongjin. Lu Kuan, Hellfire Hell, Soul Fire. Lu Kongjin Studio, Lu was time. Hell Soul, Fire World. Lu Li Studio. Lu Kongjin Studio, Hell, Soul Fire. Lu of Studio Lu Studio to Studio to Re-Studio. Lu Studio, Soul, Realm, Studio. Hell. In that case, he had to be responsible for his actions. At this time, the temperature in the space was getting hotter and hotter. The might of the flames of the way swept out from where Qin Hao was. Many people felt uncomfortable. The clusters of black willow, the wisps that burned on the ground of the dark abyss, became much smaller in size. It was as if they were afraid of the high temperature in the space and were shrinking back into the cold ground. Zhang Yin was very close to Qin Hao, so the heat was the most intense. He was already sweating profusely from the heat, and beads of sweat kept dripping down his forehead. However, he also had a high-grade Hell's soul fire in his body, which was able to resist some of the heat generated by the Red Lotus. On the contrary, the more intense the heat, the more excited Zhang Yin became. This proved that Li Chusan was not lying to him, and that D really did have an extraordinary fire seed. Finally, countless blood-red flames gathered in his palm and formed a ball of intense demonic flame. It was as red as blood. For a moment, the red light of the flames shone through the sky, illuminating the dark serene abyss. In order to express his sincerity, Qin Hao gathered the flames very seriously. His soul fire Dao intent had definitely reached the limit of the 9th realm of the Doctrine realm. After all, it was related to Zhang Yan's advancement. So how could he hide it? What kind of fire is this? The flames of the way had already been formed, but Zhang Yin was beginning to feel weak. A power that made his heart palpitate directly reached his soul. He looked at the blood-red, demonic flames burning in Qin Hao's palm, and his body seemed to tremble slightly. As expected, Meng Xiang thought to himself. The Red Lotus was ranked second on the mystical flame list, second only to the Dragon King's flame. At this time, Meng Xiang seriously looked at Qin Hao. It was hard for him to imagine how Qin Hao was able to survive with the Red Lotus spirit when he was young. This kind of extreme, tyrannical flame, a mortal's body would not be able to withstand it. Even if someone was born with a Red Lotus source spirit, it would be very hard for them to grow. Most of them will be burned to death by the backlash. In fact, the reason Zhang Yin could be where he was today was because of the War Tower's tyrannical emperor's Tao cultivation that suppressed the Hellfire soul power, allowing him to grow up. On the other hand, the Hellfire rank 5th was not something a mortal could withstand. I obtained it by chance and refined it into the will of the way. It's a pity that every time I use it, it will consume the fire source. Now, there's not much left. It will be used up after 1 or 2 more times, Qin Hao said regretfully. In the group, Shou Wuk, Xiaohua, and the others all looked at Qin Hao. Used it up after 1 or 2 more times? Was he seriously trying to trick a child? Gulp. Zhang Yin swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The way he looked at the demonic flames in Qin Hao's palm became very precious. He absolutely could not waste it. He said, "Let me try." He could feel the terror of the Red Lotus demonic flames. It seemed to be suppressing his Hellfire soul power. However, it was now or never. Just as Li Chuji had said, if Zhang Yin could melt this ball of fire, he would be able to increase his cultivation level. Even Zhang Yin himself believed that. After all, the might of the way would not lie. 2 emperor's rings appeared under his feet. A layer of black flames surrounded Zhang Yin's body. He was extremely cautious. His palm slowly reached out toward the Red Lotus demonic flames. The 2 emperor's rings under his feet began to rotate. However, as the intensity got closer, the Hellfire's soul power in his body became more and more agitated. It was as if it was extremely afraid of the ball of blood fire in front of him. Zhang Yan's body trembled. His emperor's spirit was restless. He gritted his teeth and directly reached out his hand. The black flames in his palm merged with the blood fire. He wanted to melt the blood fire and absorb its might into his body. However, at this moment, his emperor's rings suddenly shone brightly. They became 2 black rings of fire. It was as if 2 black rings were twisting and becoming thicker and thicker. Traces of cracks appeared. The emperor's rings seemed like they were about to explode. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out. It impacted the nerves of every god of war. Zhang Yan's scream was extremely ear-piercing. His entire body turned into a body of black flames. It was as if he was being burned horribly. Within the black flames, a ball of blood light was wildly corroding. It kept expanding and devouring Zhang Yan's body. It was as if it wanted to burn all the black flames into nothingness. Li Chuji, how dare you? Lu Gui, Sanmu, and Tai Hui attacked almost at the same time. In an instant, 3 Emperor-level cultivators descended among the Holy Palace's team and appeared beside Zhang Yan. Lu Gui and Tai Hui pressed their fingers on Zhang Yan's shoulders, one on each side. The Emperor-level will invaded his body of fire and suppressed the ball of blood fire that was wildly expanding. Sanmu shouted. A divine eye appeared on his forehead. It was like the eye of a god. Holy light shone on Zhang Yan's body and concentrated on the expanding blood fire in his body. In the next second, the terrifying light of the divine eye shot out and purified the blood fire. Then, the divine eye on his forehead merged with his flesh and disappeared. Zhang Yan was almost paralyzed under the hands of Tai Hui and Lu Gui. The emperor's rings dissipated, and so did the hellfire. His face was pale and lifeless. This fire is extremely fierce and overbearing. It cannot help young Master Zhang Yan to refine it. We can only force it out, Sanmu said. He looked coldly at Qin Hao. Were they trying to take the life of Lord Zhang, Lu's adopted son? Education 123 Literature Network. Chapter 1790. Zhang Yan had failed to refine the Tao fire and almost lost his life. The atmosphere became tense. Lu Guwei and the other two imperial lords stared at Qin Hao sharply. Qin Hao, on the other hand, was calm. They had agreed beforehand that he would not be responsible for the failure. He could only blame Zhang Yin for his incompetence. At this moment, the space seemed to be very quiet. The two sides looked at each other, and the slightest movement could cause a battle to break out. Perhaps, just like how they destroyed the great Zhou royal family. As long as Zhang Yin nodded, Lu Guwei and the other two emperor lords would take action and eliminate another overlord force in the East Continent. The life and death of Li Chuji of the Taoist sect and the people of the Shui Yao Holy Palace were in Zhang Yan's hands. However, Zhang Yan was scared out of his wits. He was trapped in the fear of the red lotus fire burning his emperor's soul. It took him a long time to calm down. However, he was still scared. He waved his hand and dismissed Lu Guwei and the other two imperial lords. He stood up shakily and asked Qin Hao, "What kind of fire did you ask me to refine?" "I've explained it just now. I'm not sure. Although the fire is powerful, it should meet your needs." Qin Hao said, "Yes." Zhang Yin nodded. "You're right. Unfortunately, I can't refine it. What about the divine tree fire?" Qin Hao paused. "Forget it." Zhang Yin was helpless. He had made a promise himself. If he went back on his word, it would affect his reputation. However, that was that. Zhou Wudao's matter was not over yet. At this moment, Qin Hao took out 3 emperor weapons from his storage ring. He waved his hand, and they floated in front of Zhang Yin. They shone brightly and emitted powerful emperor weapons. 2 of them were surrounded by flames. They were emperor weapons of the fire element, and were compatible with Zhang Yan's emperor soul. Qin Hao chose them for Zhang Yan. 3 emperor weapons in exchange for the life of the great Zhou prince. What if I don't agree? Zhang Yan's eyes darkened. When Zhou Wudao heard this, he could not help but look nervous. He was extremely vigilant. In that case, I have no choice but to fight alongside the prince of the great Zhou dynasty. The 3 emperors here may not be as powerful as Commander Luo, but we will not allow ourselves to be bullied. The previous battle was not over. Commander Luo, do you want to continue fighting with Swordmaster Jinji? Qin Hao said bluntly. If they were to fight, he was not afraid. Lubi's eyes landed on Shou Wuk, and his will to fight surged. Since Swordmaster Jinji had broken his nether body, he naturally wanted to try again. However, he knew very well that Shou Wuk was not easy to deal with. Even if he were to kill Shou Wuk, Lubi would be severely injured. Normally, it would not be a problem, but if he were to be injured in the dark abyss, he would be in serious trouble if he were to run into danger again. Therefore, Lubi's expression was unnatural. He was unwilling to fight to the death with Shou Wuk. Zhang Yin could sense this subtle feeling. He smiled coldly and said, "You're quite loyal. Zhou Wudao is lucky to have met you. I'll take the Emperor's weapon. Even if I let him live, he won't be able to cause any trouble." As he spoke, Zhang Yin put the Emperor's weapon into his sleeve. He turned around and walked back to Qingji Han. "Young Master Zhang Yin?" Samu and Tai Wei were both stunned. Did he leave so quickly? "We'll fight again after we get out of the relic." Lubi looked at Shou Wuk and left after saying that. "I'll be waiting," Shou Wuk replied. Samu and Tai Wei looked at Qin Hao seriously. Their cold eyes seemed to be warning him. Then, they returned to Da Qin's team. Just as Li Chuji said, they had 3 emperors. Although they were still 1 less than Zhang Yan's team, they would not be crushed like the great Zhou royal family. After all, Emperor Zhou was alone. If they wanted to destroy the 3 emperors, they would have to pay a price. And this price was not good for the current situation. There was a demon gate in front of them. That was the place where the first princess of the East Continent and Zhang Yin had to enter. Tai Wei and the others had lost their battle strength. Who would be responsible for their safety? They're scared. Li Wanji sneered. He thought that Zhang Yin would really dare to give the order. He was a little disappointed. The Spirit Emperor of the South did not have a chance to show his strength. They're not scared. They need to consider the safety of Zhang Yin and Qingji Han. It's not worth it to fight with us. Qin Hao analyzed. "Let's go and take a look. Was your body eaten in the Demon Gate?" Li Wanji's emperor body was molded from the heaven and earth's good fortune earth, and possessed an extremely powerful regenerative power. However, when he met Qin Hao, His injuries and damaged internal organs were all maintained in their original state. The traces were shocking. The power behind the demon gate was able to suppress the regenerative power of the heaven and earth. Yes, Li Wanji nodded. It's very scary. If you didn't want to come, I wouldn't have come here in my life. The group of people walked in the direction of the demon gate and gradually approached the Daqin team and the divine war guards. The three teams stood in front of the huge demon gate. However, Qin did not get too close to Zhang Yin. Are we really going to let Zhou Wudao go? Meng Xiang saw that Zhang Yin was back. If they let him go, the news might spread to the great Zhou Empire. Zhou Wendi, the ancestor of the Zhou family, would go crazy. A supreme master of the true self realm would be a big threat and could cause great damage. So what? Li Chuji is protecting me. How can I fight? Zhang Yin said lightly. At this moment, there was no arrogance on his body, and his mind was abnormally calm. However, this was his true self. He had been trained by the battle tower since he was young, and was used to the fights between the divine generals of the War God Temple. Zhang Yin was not stupid, and there was no problem with his intelligence. On the contrary, he was very smart and could see through many situations at a glance. Li Chuji was the descendant of Dendi. If the War God wanted to, he would have done it long ago. Why didn't he do it? No one knew what the Master of the Sunset Peak was thinking. The only thing they could do was to cooperate. Zhang Yin was cooperating. Would there be any consequences if he touched Li Chuji? He did not dare to try. After all, the War God had not done anything yet. Meng Xiang's heart was as clear as a mirror. He saw the worry in Zhang Yan's heart and secretly thought that the battle tower's loyalty was not easy to deal with. Zhou Wudao can't be touched for now. However, I'm not afraid of Li Chuji. I just don't want to anger Godfather and the War God ancestor. Since that's the case, it's a waste not to take the 3 Emperor weapons. Zhang Yin said proudly. When Lupi returned and reported the chase to him, he was naturally unhappy. However, he knew that he could not capture Zhou Wudao. He had already given up, but he did not expect that Li Chuji would give him 3 Emperor weapons. This was an unexpected surprise for Zhang Yin. He should have profited. The corner of Lupi's mouth twitched a few times. He seemed to have something to say, but in the end, he swallowed it back. He did report to Zhang Yin, but only told him that Li Chuji had exchanged Emperor weapons. He did not say how many Emperor weapons Li Chuji had. In the end, he was willing to give up 10, which was 3 times more than what he had now. Forget it. Lupi felt that it was better not to let Zhang Yin know, because Zhang Yin was in a very good mood. It was as if he had received a great fortune in life. Princess, should we enter the demon gate? At this moment, Sanmu looked at Qingji Han. The princess's face was very firm. It seemed like she was determined to enter this place. Of course. Sanmu, go ahead. Tai Hui said. You just let me in. Why don't you go first? Sanmu said angrily. You're divine, I can restrain demonic chi and darkness attributes. I don't have such ability. Tai Hui said, but you're stronger than me. You should go first. Sanmu definitely did not want to explore the path alone. Was he stupid? In terms of strength, Commander Luo is the leader of all the Emperor Lords present. He can be said to be invincible. Tai Hui said as he looked at the War God Guards and Meng Xiang. Enough! Stop pushing and shoving. Li Chu-san, since you're here, are you also preparing to enter the Devil Gate? Zhang Yin shouted at the Sacred Palace team. The demonic chi behind this gate is extremely strong. It's the source of the abyss. I really want to go in and take a look, Qin Hao said frankly. Since there was no return behind the gate, he naturally had to go in. Ahem, then you guys can go first. To be honest, if it's someone else, I definitely won't let him go first. War God Old Ancestor and Dendi are brothers. No matter what, I have to take care of you. Zhang Yin shouted generously. Thank you, young Master Zhang Yin. If there's an opportunity, I'm willing to give up the best. Qin Hao said. Everyone around him was surprised. No need, no need. You can go in. Our team will follow behind. Zhang Yin waved his hand impatiently. Qin Hao nodded and strode forward. This time, the leader was changed to his original body. Wuk and Li Wanji followed behind him. The demon gate was located at the end of the abyss. There might be an ancient great demon buried inside. It would definitely be extremely dangerous. Thinking about the 4 Nirvana Sword sovereigns in the manor in Sword City, one could tell that the Demon Gate might be even more terrifying than the manor. Counting his previous life, Qin Hao had entered the God Burial Valley twice. In total, he had encountered 3 divine treasures. The first was the Great Void Divine Cauldron. The second was the sword intent of the manor owner's first sword. That sword intent contained a trace of divine mysteries. Although it wasn't complete, it had already touched upon the divine realm. The third was the maple leaf that controlled the will of others in the Hall of the God of Weapons. In the past, Qin Hao thought that the God Burial Valley might only have the Great Void Divine Cauldron. But now, he had clearly underestimated it. Other than the maple leaf and the sword intent of the manor owner, there might be other places. For example, the demon gate in front of them. Behind the gate, there might be a demon king waiting for them. The first person to enter had to be Qin Hao. With his flawless sovereign soul controlling 2 divine treasures, he could at least protect himself if he encountered the demon king. If it was Wuk, Qin Hao wouldn't be at ease. The Sacred Palace's team flew up from the ground. The demon gate was incomparably tall. From the outside, endless demonic qi formed a black vortex. Qin Hao and the rest were heading towards the center of the vortex. As they moved further and further away, the team was finally swallowed by the demon gate. They were like unremarkable grains of sand being sucked into it. "Young Master Zhang Yan, how is it? Should we move?" Lu Gui asked. They didn't follow Zhang Yan's instructions and followed Qin Hao. Instead, they waited for a few breaths of time as if they were waiting for something to happen. But in the end, the situation didn't happen. The demon gate was very peaceful. There wasn't a single scream. This proved that Li Chuji and the rest had safely passed through. It seems like I was overthinking. Let's go. Zhang Yan knew that they couldn't wait any longer. He wouldn't believe Qin Hao's nonsense and leave the best treasure to him. At this moment, he waved his hand and signaled the god of war to get into formation. Instantly, brilliant figures gathered together. Meng Xiang took the lead and stepped into the air. He was at the front of the team. Behind him was Lu Gui, followed by Zhang Yan and Han Qingji. San Mu and Tai Hui protected the 2 flanks. The experts of the Daqin Empire and the God of War guards gathered together and disappeared into the vortex in the center of the Demon Gate. Chapter 1791. After stepping into the Demon Gate, they seemed to have fallen into a dream. An endless black tide rushed towards them. It was pure black, the ultimate black, and there was not a single ray of light. Qin Hao and his group walked slowly in the darkness. They seemed to be lost in a dream. They had lost their direction and had no goal. They could only keep walking, but they could not reach the end. Something's wrong. Qin Hao's 10,000 spirit fiery eyes flickered as he stared at the black tide. Those eyes that could see through the essence of all things had lost their function at this time. They could not see through the darkness. He could hear some rustling sounds, like a breeze blowing on leaves. The cold air flowed past his face, proving that he was in a certain space. Moreover, it was not a sealed space. However, the black tide drowned their vision and they could not see their surroundings. The path under their feet was very flat. They did not run into any obstacles while walking, but why could they never come out? A formation. Qin Hao's first thought was that they were trapped in a formation. Li Wanji, when you entered the Demon Gate with Lin Feng, was it the same? Qin Hao suddenly stopped. The people behind him bumped into him directly. Showuk's groan came from the dark space. I didn't have time to pay attention. Not long after I entered with Lin Feng, I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know what happened at all, so I left immediately. As a result, I became like that. Li Wanji's voice was trembling. He still had lingering fears when he recalled it. When he entered the Demon Gate for the first time, he used enchantment to set up a teleportation landmark outside the gate. The demonic aura inside the gate was very strong. He was worried that something bad would happen and it would be convenient for him to retreat, so he left a way out in advance. And this way of retreat saved his life. When danger approached, Li Wanji felt that something was wrong and immediately pulled Lin Feng back to the landmark. Then he found that part of his body had been bitten away. How terrifying! The opponent did not know anything and did not feel any pain when he was hurt. It was like a piece of iron thrown into a furnace, gradually melting until it disappeared. "They're coming," Lin Feng warned. The airflow was changing. There seemed to be many things in the darkness crazily approaching. His soul merged with the wind. Lin Feng was very sensitive to the airflow. He remembered that when he and Li Wanji had an accident for the first time, it was also like this. Buzz. The sound of the sword reverberated. An extremely sharp sword aura radiated out. Everyone in the darkness felt the extremely turbulent power of the sword will. It was obvious that Showuk had made his move, but his sword aura, of all things, was unable to pierce through the darkness. Everyone was extremely nervous and apprehensive. The St. Palace's monarchs all released their Dao to protect themselves, including Tsayogwa and the others. Their bodies were silently being gnawed away, and the thought of it made their scalps go numb. Qin Hao stood at the very front of the group. When the danger approached, he could clearly feel it. At this moment, he let out a cry of surprise. This danger wasn't the desolate elemental essence of no return to Pyrolite, but rather, it was Devil Qi. The extremely intense demonic Qi was completely different from the demonic Qi outside the door. The demonic Qi contained a terrifying divine power. It was the law of the demonic path. Break! Without any hesitation, Qin Hao activated the art of endless samsara in his body. The Emperor will resonated with the great void cauldron, and the divine artifact was summoned. The artifact's spirit vibrated, and a purple-gold light suddenly burst out from the darkness. It was incomparably dazzling. The power of the same level directly broke through the endless black tide. At this moment, a purple-gold three-legged cauldron appeared in everyone's vision. It spun rapidly, and ancient and mysterious runes flowed on it. A domineering, tearing power spread through the space, extending to all directions. Wherever the purple-gold light covered, the black tide frantically retreated. Buzz! The space produced a terrifying vibration, and a roar entered everyone's eardrums. It was as if their brains were being torn apart. Everyone, including Showuk and Li Wanji, hugged their heads with their hands. The Emperor light around them surged, and their faces were filled with pain. But at this moment, the black tide finally retreated, slowly revealing the surrounding landscape. Although the light was still gloomy, everyone could see clearly. This is... Elder Tian Yun's eyes widened in shock. His expression was very exaggerated as he looked forward. They saw an incomparably huge throne standing on the ground, majestic and imposing. They were arranged in a circle, and there were a total of 7 of them. On each throne, there was an incomparably majestic figure sitting faintly. They were as ethereal as phantoms, but they exuded an aura that suppressed the world. When they saw these figures, Tsayogwa and the others almost knelt on the ground in fear. They could not control themselves at all. In addition, around the 7 thrones, there were a large number of corpses scattered. The number was shocking, and there were all kinds of corpses. Humans and beasts were all badly damaged. From the analysis of the traces, it was clear that they were forcefully shattered and cut off by external forces. Moreover, the corpses here did not have any trace of demonic Qi left. It was different from outside the demon gate. It was as if the moment the owner of the corpse died, the demonic soul was completely wiped clean. Qin Hao did not dare to underestimate these corpses. Perhaps each of them had a cultivation that far surpassed the demons outside the demon gate. If outside the demon gate was the world of the little demons, then inside the demon gate was the domain of the extremely strong, especially the 7 thrones. Even Qin Hao could not help but tremble violently when he saw them. Looking at those ethereal figures, they were like demonic gods that suppressed everyone. The emperors of the mortal world could only look up to them. The impact of the scene was too strong. After a while, everyone still had not recovered from the shock. Qin Hao felt a very oppressive feeling in his heart. He felt inexplicably sad. It was as if he had been to this place behind the demon gate before and had participated in something. The feeling was very strange, and there was an indescribable pain in his heart. Trying hard to take a few breaths, Qin Hao calmed himself down and looked towards the center of the seven thrones. There was a black demonic sword stabbed into the ground. The shape of the sword was very ordinary, and there was nothing outstanding about it. It's tragic. I have also experienced countless battles. The destruction of the Divine Palace has been repeated, and I have participated in the battle of the Xianyuan royal family in the southern region. But I have never seen anything as tragic as this. Xiaoguo looked at the scattered, broken corpses. The injuries were extremely cruel. Some of the corpses were shaken to the point that they were no longer bones, and some were scattered very far away. It was completely imaginable how fierce the battle was, and how terrifying the strength of the people who attacked was. The Great Path is boundless. Why must there be a hierarchy? Qin Hao said inexplicably. Even he did not know why, but it appeared in his mind out of nowhere, and it stunned everyone. I feel that you seem to know what happened here. Tell me. I like to gossip about the ancient legends of the continent. I am willing to be your loyal listener, Li Wanwan said with a smile. After the black tide broke, he regained his sight. With a sense of security, he was not so nervous anymore. I don't like to gossip, Qin Hao replied coldly. There was an indescribable sadness in the aura here. It was as if a loved one had died in front of him, and he could do nothing about it. But he had never been to the back of the Demon Gate. Logically speaking, this place had nothing to do with him, so why would he be sad? He glanced at the seven thrones. Each throne had a different style, including the carvings, patterns, and residual demonic god chi. They were all different. Among them, one of the thrones was even shattered. It was badly damaged, as if it had been broken by an external force. Moreover, there was more than one person who had broken it, and this broken throne was the target that Qin Hao was looking for. The elements of desolation were hidden in the throne. Are you ready? Qin Hao's eyes fell on Zhou Wudao. Yes. Zhou Wudao nodded. He naturally knew what was going to happen next. If he wanted revenge, if he wanted to stabilize the great Zhou dynasty, and if he wanted to revive his father's prosperity, he needed to be like Shou Wuk and Mo Xian, experiencing a drastic change, even though it might cost him his life. But he did not hesitate and was willing to gamble with his life, because there was no turning back in Zhou Wudao's life. Chapter 1792. Behind the Demon Gate was the end of the Dark Abyss. The environment here was dilapidated, and there were corpses everywhere. It was like a demon god palace where the seven demon lords were enshrined. Due to the extremely tragic battle, not a single demon soul was left. Therefore, there was no danger. The seven thrones were the treasures of the Dark Abyss. On the throne, there were seven demon god phantoms that were eternal and indestructible, looking down on the world as if they were still alive. Each of the demon god phantoms contained extremely terrifying darkness, divine power. After looking around, Qin Hao found that one of the thrones seemed to be surging with boundless netherworld divine fire, as if it was the fire god that ruled the demon world. There was also a battle demon god with a huge demon halberd standing on the throne. On the largest throne, there was an 8-armed demon god with 8 arms spread open, looking very ferocious. Only the broken throne had no demon god phantoms, as if the owner had been completely annihilated, and not a trace of what was left. The worm of no return was hiding in the broken throne, which was a little special, but for some reason. This throne was Zhou Wudao's target. Suddenly, there was a movement behind them, and the aura of many experts spread over. Qin Hao did not need to turn around to know that Zhang Yin and Qing Jihan had brought people in. What a vicissitude, demonic aura. This is... Zhang Yin saw the 7 thrones and the demon god phantoms on the thrones at first glance, and then he was stunned on the spot, as if he had lost his soul. Qing Jihan, Samu, Tai Wei, and Lu Yo, and Bai Xiang, who had one foot in the true self, all had the same expression. They were extremely shocked, and their hearts were in great turmoil. This is probably the Dark Abyss Temple, and there are the demon wills of the 7 demon gods here. I did not attack immediately after I came in, so young Master Zhang Yin and Princess Qingji should have the priority to choose. Qin Hao said calmly. Zhang Yin let him enter the dark abyss first to test the risks with human lives. Xiaogua and the others could see it, so of course Qin Hao knew. However, since the worm of no return was in the dark abyss, Qin Hao would come in no matter what, so he did not care. As for the priority, he was not worried that Zhang Yin would have the same goal as him. Out of the 7 demon god thrones, 6 were in good condition. Wuk only had 1 broken throne. If Zhang Yin had a brain, with his superior background, would he have chosen the worst one? Li Chuji sure is righteous. I'm starting to admire you. No wonder Zhou Wudao is willing to bet his life on you. He's really blessed. Zhang Yin said coldly. After he finished speaking, he looked around the throne and quickly fixed his gaze on the demonic fire shadow. He nodded and said, I choose that one. Qingji, what about you? Qingji Han's beautiful eyes gradually became demonic. Her pupils were completely dyed black, like an endless abyss, flashing with the light of destruction. The mole at the corner of her eye became darker and darker, gradually turning from red to black. She pointed to one of the thrones and said, I choose this demon god. Qin Hao looked in the direction that Han Qingji was pointing at. On the throne, there was a terrifying demonic god's illusory figure. Its face was blurry, and there seemed to be a third eye on its forehead. It was very similar to Great Qin's 3-eyed sovereign lord when he opened his divine eye. However, the attributes were completely different. This demonic god's third eye contained an incomparably terrifying destructive power. It was as if a single glance could take away the lives of all things in the world. Qingji Han had obviously chosen a demon god that was the most compatible with her soul attribute, allowing her to unleash the power of destruction more perfectly. Then let's start. Zhang Yin stepped forward impatiently. Seeing this, Lu Gui reminded him, will it be dangerous? Why don't we try it on someone first? There's no need for that. Although the demonic chi here is strong, the demonic souls have been completely destroyed by supreme power. Even the 7 demonic gods have all fallen. The phantoms are the only remnants of their wills, so they are not harmful. Emperor Meng Xiang's Tao was the deepest and closest to the divine path. His words naturally carried a lot of weight. Qingji Han did not hesitate at all. She stepped directly into the shadow of the 3-eyed demon god. Her eye of destruction had already sensed that the shadow was a remnant of will and was not a threat. Even so, it was a great fortune for her to be able to obtain a wisp of will. Qingji Han entered the shadow of the demon god and disappeared before everyone's eyes. It was as if she had entered another world. Immediately, the shadow of the demon god on the throne rippled and became fainter and fainter, as if it was being absorbed. Zhang Yin did not hesitate. The emperor's ring bloomed under his feet, and his body was surrounded by black hellfire. He stepped forward and entered the shadow of the demon god. Immediately, the shadow also began to fade. Zhou Wudao, do it, Qin Hao said. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried. If Zhang Yin went for the broken throne, there would definitely be a fight. Both sides would be embroiled in a fierce battle. Meng Xiang was very strong, and the other side had 4 emperor lords. They did not have the upper hand. But now, Zhang Yin had chosen the netherworld fire god. Zhou Wudao nodded. He stepped forward and summoned his life emperor spirit. The shadow of the ancient fierce beast Tao Tai appeared behind him, emitting a greedy and cruel aura. The Tao Tai shadow enveloped Zhou Wudao and rushed directly to the broken throne. Strangely, Zhou Wudao also disappeared at that moment. He turned into a speck of light and evaporated into thin air. It was as if he had been absorbed into the throne. Qin Hao similarly stepped out and followed closely behind Zhou Wudao. He stepped onto the majestic throne, and with a flash of light, he disappeared from everyone's sight. What's going on? Sacred leader Tai Hui was puzzled. Were the 2 of them together, sharing the demon god's will? Interesting. They didn't choose the remaining 4 thrones, but chose the 2 of them together. Could it be that Li Chuji and Zhou Wudao have some special fetish? The 3-eyed man smiled. Li Chuji's actions were confusing. However, the three-eyed man was quite envious. Although there was a trace of the demonic god's will left, it was still a god-level power. Even Emperor Lords would have thoughts about it. Unfortunately, the three-eyed man's shining divine eyes clashed with the demonic god's power. He could not refine it at all. Not only him, but everyone present could not obtain the remaining will of the demonic god. Only those with matching emperor spirits could have a chance to gain the demonic god's approval. If they did not, the consequences would be unpredictable. No one was willing to take the risk. Han Qingji, Zhou Wudao, and Zhang Yin had disappeared. One of them had the eye of nirvana, one had the innate hellfire, and the last one had the Tao Ye's emperor's soul. All of them belonged to the power of darkness and destruction. Only Li Chusan could not see through him. He was curious. Could it be that Li Chusan also had some kind of darkness soul force? They naturally did not know that Qin Hao did not chase after Zhou Wudao to obtain the demonic god's will. It was because Zhou Wudao needed his help to have the chance to fuse the desolate element and the emperor's spirit into one. It was impossible for the great Zhou prince to do it alone. If Qin Hao did not follow, Zhou Wudao would only die. Entering the throne was like stepping into the demonic gate. Everything was pitch black. Qin Hao called out Zhou Wudao's name a few times, but there was no response. The two had lost contact. Qin Hao felt that the situation was getting out of control. Without delay, he wanted to take out the great void cauldron to find Zhou Wudao. At this moment, the endless black tide receded. An indescribably terrifying aura descended. In the haze, Qin Hao seemed to see a figure gradually approaching, emitting a monstrous demonic god's aura. Suddenly, Qin Hao could not move at all. His connection with the great void cauldron was directly cut off. An incomparably terrifying will invaded his consciousness. A voice echoed in his mind. Red Lotus, Overlord Fire, Ancient Dragon Spirit, Tranquil Water, Flawless Emperor Path. Although your cultivation is weak, your foundation is not bad. Junior, how long have you been through? Chapter 1793. Inside the throne, the space was chaotic. Zhou Wudao and Qin Hao entered one after the other and lost contact with each other. Suddenly, a stalwart figure appeared in front of Qin Hao, as if a demon god had awoken, exuding a monstrous demon qi. The voice that came out of his mouth was incomparably silent and emotionless. When this voice entered his divine sense, even the connection between his divine path cultivation method and the divine artifact was forcefully cut off. At this moment, Qin Hao's heart trembled violently. He felt as if he had transformed into a useless ant facing an ancient demon god. His life and death were beyond his control. Awe, fear, he had never experienced such feelings before. Dena had always been the only one who looked down on all living beings. At this moment, he felt as if he was being stepped on by a demon god, who could turn him into dust with a single thought. Qin Hao did not even have the courage to respond. His body trembled as he looked at the demon god in front of him, his face extremely pale. The demon god's silhouette became clearer and clearer. His body was tall and powerful. As he approached step by step, the rhythmic sound of armor could be heard in the space. When he walked in front of Qin Hao, he was even taller than him by a head, full of indescribable deterrence. "How many years have you been?" The voice asked again. Qin Hao looked up at him. The demon god's tall body gradually solidified, as if he had come to life. He wore a set of black crystal armor that was full of scars. His long black hair draped over his shoulders, exuding a demonic aura. However, his facial features could not be seen. His entire face was black, and only his eyes flickered with a scarlet light, exceptionally domineering and fierce. Gulp! Qin Hao swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He had perfected his Tao and forged 9 flawless emperor rings. His battle strength could compete with a half-step true self-great emperor. Was he so weak in the eyes of the demon god? But it seemed that the demon god was right. Now, even Qin Hao felt that he was like an ant. After all, in the eyes of a true divine path expert, a nirvana great emperor was no different from an ant. And this person was a true demon god, a supreme expert who had transcended the heavenly way. He would rather die than enter the cycle of reincarnation. Replying to Senior in the Divine Wilderness calendar, 13,985 years. Qin Hao did not ask who the demon god was. In the past, he would have asked him who he was. However, at this moment, he directly answered with an incomparably sincere attitude. Moreover, no matter what the other party asked, he did not hide anything. Who would dare to stand face to face with a demon god? The Divine Wilderness era. The demonic shadow raised his head slightly, his tone weathered, as if he was lamenting something. He muttered, "After the primordial spirit recovery era, will the future generations be called the Divine Wilderness era?" Yes, the deities of the primordial spirit era disappeared, and from then on, the continent was renamed the Divine Wilderness, and there was no more divine path in the world. Qin Hao replied, 13,000 years. So it had been so long since the Great War. Now that he thought about it, it felt like just yesterday. Ha! The demonic shadow shook his head and chuckled. Qin Hao listened obediently and didn't dare to make a sound. If the other party didn't ask, he wouldn't speak carelessly. However, he could tell that this demonic god had personally participated in the tragic battle behind the demonic gate. And at this moment, Qin Hao's role was to listen obediently. He had always been very enthusiastic about the ancient legends of the continent and was willing to be the demon god's loyal listener. The demon god let out a long sigh. After a long time, he turned his attention back to Qin Hao. He said, "There is no more Shinto in the world, so the continent is renamed the Divine Wilderness." The name is in line with reality. It seems that Guy has succeeded in closing the plain, cutting off the foreign experts, and continuing the peace for the future generations of the continent for more than 13,000 years. Even if I die in battle, it will be a worthy death. Senior, you. Qin Hao's heart was struck by the demon god's words. He trembled fiercely. Although he knew that the demon god had fallen and what was in front of him was a remnant of his will, he was still full of reverence. Because, even if it was a remnant of his will, he could still effortlessly wipe him off the face of the earth. The great void cauldron and the maple leaf could not protect him. The difference in cultivation between a real god and his half-god body was too great. However, the reason why Qin Hao was shocked was because the other party said that he had closed the plain of the continent, cutting off the foreign experts. What was this situation? Didn't the continent only have 4 regions? East continent, southern region, northern border, western Liang. Where did the plain come from? Could it be that other than the 4 regions, there was another continent? At this moment, Qin Hao's mind was full of questions. When he entered the God Burial Valley in his previous life, he treated this place as a treasure land and did not care about anything else. After his rebirth, he was curious about the origin of the God Burial Valley. When he walked past the Sword City, he felt the massacre of 1,000,000 sword emperors. The God Burial Plains were filled with the corpses of ancient strange beasts. A divine weapons sect stood tall. It was the divine weapon forging ground. The emperor's treasures floated all over the sky. Now that he came to the secluded abyss, he saw a scene of devastation and mountains of corpses. Qin Hao thought that the birth of the God Burial Valley was caused by the war between the demon world and the divine world. But that was not the case. Listening to the demon god's words, he did not stand on the opposite side of the divine world. On the contrary, they were allies against a common enemy. Do you want to hear a story? A story about how there were no gods in the world and the continent became a desolate land. The demon god sensed Qin Hao's thoughts. He felt that there was a need for the future generations to remember this war. Because of this war, the divine world and the demon world collapsed at the same time. The continent was ruled by the emperor and lost the divine path. But now, with Qin Hao and the rest barging into the ancient main battlefield, the divine path would definitely be broken. The demon god himself was also clear that this was fate. Soon, many divine-level experts would be born on the continent, and the situation in the mortal world would undergo a drastic change. However, that was not important. After all, the demon god had fallen long ago. But he needed to let Qin Hao understand the continent's past. After all, This person would be responsible for the revival of the demon world and become the first ruler of the demon world. I am willing to listen. Qin Hao was as obedient as a child. Whatever the demon god said, he would not resist. I will not hurt you. There is no need to be so nervous. Before the divine wilderness, the continent was called the Yuanling continent. There were many god-level experts in the continent, each with their own territory and orthodoxy. At that time, the demon world and the human world were still in conflict. Every 200 or 300 years, a conflict would break out, but it was well controlled. At most, a few hundred Nirvana minor emperors would die. It would not hurt the foundation of the human race and the demon race. The demon god seemed to have found a happy childhood memory. He was so happy that he smiled innocently. Unfortunately, the good times did not last long. Finally, one day, both the demon world and the divine world were dead. A group of extraterrestrial experts had discovered this continent. They had come from an extremely distant plane, and their forces were extremely powerful. The peak experts who led the group were not weaker than the 7 kings of the devil world and the 14 great gods of the human clan. Even if the demon world and the divine world joined forces, they were still defeated. Since then, blood flowed like rivers on the continent. Countless powerful sects were destroyed. The sword city that Qin Hao had come to was one of them. It was also the sword city that resisted the most fiercely. Millions of sword emperors were massacred. However, the Yuanling continent was not without resistance. After this defeat, the experts of the 2 worlds gathered together and focused on cultivation. They wanted to break through to the divine world. But they could not do it. Until later, a mixed-blood genius was born from the dragon clan and the human race, which started the crazy era of the dragon warriors. In those few hundred years, thousands of mixed-blood geniuses of the human and dragon clan defeated the foreign experts and won a short period of peace for the people of the continent. Hearing this, Qin Hao's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that he was also a dragon warrior. Although he was not pure, he could use the tyrannical physical strength of the dragon clan and the powerful emperor will of the human race. Indeed, after the combination of the two, regardless of lethality or killing intent, it was far from what ordinary martial artists could compare to. Qin Hao's growth was the best proof. Although the guy who started the Dragon Warrior era was young, his strength was so strong that even I was impressed. This person was also proficient in alchemy and perfectly restrained his madness. A dragon warrior who could maintain his rationality in madness was the most terrifying. Ha ha! The demon god seemed to have found something fun and could not help laughing. It could be seen that although he was impressed, he was actually not convinced. It seemed that in terms of relationship, he was very close to that dragon-human expert. The rise of the dragon warriors broke the pace of the foreign enemies. The demon god did not know why the other party was determined to invade the Yuanling continent. It seemed that the creatures born on this continent were very different from them. Until now, the demon god still could not see the reason. But in the end, the demon world was willing to become the main battlefield and hold back the army of the foreign powerhouses. The 14 great gods of the divine world sacrificed their divine Tao as the price to lay down a divine Tao array formation. The dragon-human genius sealed the Yuanling continent and completely blocked the passage to other planes. In the final battle, just as Qin Hao had seen, the devil world was completely annihilated. The 7 sovereigns had paid the price of their deaths to successfully hold back the extraterrestrial enemies, buying precious time for the human dragon to seal the plane. With the demon world as the main battlefield, the creatures of this world were wiped out. But the demon god could also imagine that the situation on the dragon-human side must not be optimistic. When a martial artist broke through to the arch realm, their perception would be so strong that it was simply unimaginable for ordinary people. The moment they sensed the dragon-human activating the array formation to seal the plane, one could imagine how fierce the counterattack of the foreign powerhouses would be. Therefore, the demon god told Qin Hao that the guy seemed to have succeeded. After the demon god died in battle, he sealed the Yuanling continent and blocked the reinforcements of the foreign powerhouses. The demon god even suspected that after the dragon human sealed the Yuan Ling continent, he killed his way to the foreign powerhouses. Chapter 1794. The divine path was beyond the heavenly Tao and was as glorious as the heavens and earth. It was not bound by the cycle of reincarnation and had an endless lifespan. It was a supreme realm that all the emperors of the continent dreamed of, who did not desire to have an endless lifespan. And in order to block the passage between the continent and other planes, the 14 great gods of the primordial spirits sacrificed their divine power and gave up their eternal lifespan to help the dragon seal the continent. The 7 thrones of the demon world and all the creatures of the world died in battle. From then on, there were no more divine steps in the world, and it was reduced to the divine wilderness continent that was abandoned by the gods. This was the view of the world. In fact, the gods and demon kings that protected the divine wilderness all died for the sake of the common people. This was such a broad mind and spirit. The peace of the continent was not easy to come by. Qin Hao felt deep admiration after hearing this. He remembered that in the divine palace, Tian Quan had said that if one day, would he be willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the common people? At that time, Qin Hao's first thought was no. He cared about the people around him. What did the common people have to do with him? However, the ancient gods did it. Even the 7 great demon gods of the demon world were willing to give up immortality for the sake of the common people. When one reached the end of cultivation, would there be no more desires? So, was cultivation for immortality or for the common people? Qin Hao formed a knot in his heart. However, he was still far from the divine path and did not need to think about it at the moment. But after listening to the story of the demon god and the foreign experts, the sadness in his heart became heavier. There was no action in the world without a reason. The people from the outer realms had crossed plains to come here, and the strongest among them also had the power of the divine path. With such terrifying power, why didn't they fight the gods of Yuan Ling to the death? Did they come here purely to invade? Perhaps, not necessarily. Purely for the sake of invading, the price was too heavy. Qin Hao felt that it might be related to other matters. The 6 great demon gods and the 14 great gods of the human race have fought for more than 13,000 years of peace for the continent. But the peace will eventually be broken. The divine path will reappear on the continent, and the seal will be dissolved. At that time, we might once again face the foreign experts. Are you ready to accept your mission? The demon shadow's tone became solemn. Mission? I don't understand. Qin Hao muttered in his heart. It couldn't be that the fiend god wanted to pass down the divine Tao profundity to him, right? Wait a minute. Qin Hao possessed a type of divine Tao. He did not come to the dark abyss to inherit the position of demon god, but only to retrieve the stalk of no return. There's not much time left. My remnant consciousness is very weak. Since I've been awakened by you, and your cultivation is too weak, your foundation is the best among all of us. You are the most suitable to inherit my great power. Come, take on the mission. For the divine wilderness, for all living beings, for the future. The demon god's body shone with a terrifying demonic light. A powerful demonic power enveloped Qin Hao's body. Qin Hao was shocked and said, Demonic god, don't be anxious. I'm not ready yet. Your successor has been chosen. Someone else? You mean him? The devil god didn't force Qin Hao. With a wave of his hand, devil light flashed, and Zhou Wudao appeared from the chaos. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to have fallen into a deep slumber. Yes, he is the successor that you've been waiting for 10,000 years. The perfect successor, Qin Hao said and wiped the sweat off his forehead. For all living beings? Forget it. Such a great mission should be taken on by Zhou Wudao. Nonsense. This person's foundation is too weak. His cultivation is not even as good as yours. The demon god said angrily, obviously looking down on Zhou Wudao's sovereign spirit. Senior demon god, my brother's foundation may be a little weak, but he has a good character and cares for the world. He will not let you down. As for me, you see, I have divine power. In order not to be forced by the other party, Qin Hao could only summon the great void cauldron. At this time, the demonic power that the demon god had shrouded him with had been removed. The art of endless samsara could operate freely. As he communicated with the implement spirit, the divine path's power of law spread out. Everywhere it passed, the chaos was torn apart. When the demonic shadow saw this scene, he was stunned. It really was the power of law, but it was a pseudo-law. After all, Qin Hao's realm had not broken through the Emperor realm. Even so, the demonic shadow was still shocked. His scarlet eyes stared straight at the great void cauldron. The divine weapon resonated with Qin Hao and released the power of law that he was familiar with. No wonder you look down on my power. It turns out that you have inherited one of his dragon god's powers. The demonic shadow said. Who is this he that senior is talking about? Qin Hao asked. The first-generation human dragon, a tyrannical fellow who single-handedly fought against the three over-gods of the outer realm. The continent was also sealed by him. As for the cauldron in your hand, it was a divine item created by the human dragon to control his killing nature while studying the Tao of pills. Speaking of which, it's the worst treasure he had. The demonic shadow said. This sentence made Qin Hao panic. It was actually the worst treasure. With this cauldron, he had almost swept away thousands of monsters of his generation in this life. But it turned out to be the worst divine item in the demonic shadow's possession. His heart ached. I have another divine item. Senior, please take a look at it. Qin Hao stretched out his left hand. As the light of flames appeared, an ordinary fiery red maple leaf appeared. Suddenly, in the chaotic space, a strange power spread, and endless maple leaves began to fall. At this moment, the demonic shadow's imposing body trembled obviously, as if he was affected by the power of the divine path contained in the maple leaf. But soon he calmed down and said, For more than 10,000 years, my consciousness is too weak. I can't believe it can even affect this trash-level divine item. Trash level? Qin Hao's expression was extremely ugly. This item has just been born, and its weapon spirit is too weak. When I was alive, I could destroy it with a single thought, the demonic shadow said proudly. He was the strongest of the 7 sovereigns of the demon world. He didn't care about the other 6 at all. Senior, do you know who this item belongs to? Qin Hao asked. Qi Ming of the Divine Weapons Sect. The demonic shadow replied. He was one of the 14 deities of the human race, but his combat power was the weakest. However, master craftsmen were not good at battling. Their forte lay in their magic treasures. Although they said that Qin Hao's maple leaf was trash, the Tao of the maple leaf was actually very special. It was different from all the divine treasures that Qi Ming had made before. Perhaps the true power of the maple leaf could only be seen after the item's spirit grew up. Qi Ming. Qin Hao muttered the name silently. He would remember this favor. You have 2 divine items, and your nomological aura contains the power of the human dragon. According to the rules, I can't give you the power of the demonic Tao. The demonic shadow seemed to be in a difficult position as he looked at Zhou Wu Dao. Could it be that he, the number 1 sovereign of the demon world, was really going to choose this trash as his successor? Could he support the demon world, withstand the future changes of the continent, and resist the invaders? The demonic shadow's heart was filled with worry. If he knew this would happen, he would have directly transferred the girl who entered the demon eye throne to this place and let that girl inherit his power. In comparison, apart from Qin Hao, Qing Shi Han's bloodline and talent were the most outstanding. However, it was too late now. It seemed like the demonic eyes had already been merged with her. Senior, there's a good saying. It's better to have something than nothing. Moreover, the Taodai Monarch soul isn't that weak, right? Qin Hao chuckled. What do you know? The demonic shadow replied, unhappily. He took in a deep breath and sighed. Forget it. Let's choose him. It's better to have something than nothing. However, I'm really worried about leaving the demon world in his hands. Chapter 1795. Senior, since you have already chosen him, why are you still worried? Even if you don't believe in my brother, you should believe in yourself. Qin Hao said solemnly. The ignorant are fearless. You are so optimistic. All right, there's nothing for you to do here. You can leave now. The demonic shadow waved his hand. Next, his will would merge with Zhou Wu Dao, giving him the power of the great Dao of the demonic god to complete the inheritance. Qin Hao took the initiative to give up the opportunity. Moreover, he already had a strand of the human dragon divine force, so there was no need for him to stay. Senior, don't be anxious. To be honest, I came here for another purpose. You should have a strand of desolate element in your hands, right? Qin Hao said as he looked at Zhou Wu Dao. You want to merge the no return into his sovereign soul. The demonic shadow was slightly surprised. He thought for a while and nodded. That's a good idea. This way, his Taotai's sovereign soul will become stronger. Senior is wise. Qin Hao praised. As expected of the ancient demon king, the demonic shadow's scarlet eyes glanced at Qin Hao. Then, he stretched out his powerful palm. Demonic might spread out, and the chaotic space began to tremble. It was as if a force was forcefully pulled out from the chaotic space and kneaded in his palm. Qin Hao looked over and saw a ball of black qi appearing in the demonic shadow's palm. It was as if it was an endless black hole that could devour everything. At this moment, the red lotus soul fire in his body became restless. The desolate element could sense each other. It was indeed the no return. This desolate element was actually occupied by the demonic shadow. The array that sealed the 7 thrones must have been set up by the demonic shadow's will. No wonder Li Wanqi fell into a trap. First, I will help him upgrade his sovereign soul. Then, I will give him the power of the demonic shadow. This time, you should be satisfied. The demonic shadow looked at Qin Hao. This junior was quite attentive to his friends. Allow me to lend you a hand, senior, Qin Hao said with a smile. Of course, he was satisfied. Zhou Wudao's luck was even better than that of Mo, Xian, and Wuk. This brat was extremely lucky. Maybe in the future, even he would be able to bask in Zhou Wudao's glory. When Qin Hao offered to help, the demonic shadow did not refuse. Although he could also suppress the power of the primordial elements, the current demonic god was actually very weak. If he could conserve his energy, it would be very useful for him to carry out the inheritance. He could spend more time carefully sculpting Zhou Wudao so that the inheritance would be as complete as possible. You will suppress the power of the skeleton of no return. I will stabilize his sovereign soul. The demonic shadow waved his hand and directly threw the skeleton of no return in front of Qin Hao. Then, his powerful palm pressed towards the void. A majestic demonic aura swept out. Terrifying demonic light fell and bathed Zhou Wudao's body. At this moment, Zhou Wudao looked like he had an invisible and domineering demonic aura. Qin Hao shouted softly. He channeled his divine tear technique and resonated with the great void cauldron spirit. Suddenly, a faint divine power invaded the primordial elements. The black vortex of the skeleton of no return started to weaken. He slapped his palm towards the divine cauldron. The sound of the cauldron rang out in the void. The black vortex turned into tiny threads and slowly entered Zhou Wudao's body. It connected with his divine soul and gradually merged with the Tao Ye's sovereign soul. The murderous roar faintly came from the chaotic space. Zhou Wudao's sovereign soul underwent a qualitative change. He went through the entire process while he was unconscious and did not feel any pain. With Qin Hao, a fake god, and the real devil king of the devil world working together, the fusion of the sovereign souls was very smooth. It was much more fortunate than Shou Wuk and Mo Xian. Soon, the primordial elements of the skeleton of no return were completely absorbed into Zhou Wudao's sovereign soul. This time, not only was the time taken short, but Qin Hao also did not consume any energy. It was unlike when he fused the void chain for Mo Xian, which took 10 days and 10 nights. The flames did not extinguish. When he finished, he was so tired that he almost collapsed. Thank you for your help, senior. I will leave my brother to you. I will take my leave. Qin Hao clasped his hands and was about to leave the chaotic space. Wait. The demonic shadow helped Zhou Wudao increase the power of his sovereign soul. After all, Zhou Wu Dao was his successor. However, he seemed to have discovered other secrets from Qin Hao. He was puzzled and said, "The divine power in your body seems a little strange." Strange? Qin Hao frowned slightly. The divine power of the human dragon is not very pure. Or rather, it is mixed with other divine powers. The demonic shadow seemed to find it difficult to understand why there were two different divine powers in Qin Hao's body. Does it have an effect on me? Qin Hao became serious. There was indeed more than one divine power in his body. In other words, there was an extremely evil power. Of course, it has a great effect. The demonic shadow said seriously. "Senior, please tell me if there is a way to remedy it." Qin Hao asked the demonic shadow for advice. He knew nothing about divine path. After all, the entire continent had lost divine path. Even the divine palace had no records of it. In fact, the power of the evil fetus had troubled him for a long time. All this time, he did not find anything wrong with him and did not care too much about it. Now, listening to the demonic shadow, it seemed that there should not be two types of divine power in one person. The power of divine path is the sublimation of the Emperor's Tao. In other words, it is the end of the Tao. The Tao comprehended by divine path is self-contained. It is not much different from the power of the heavenly Tao. It is the source of the origin. However, the difference is that the heavenly Tao is more multifaceted and more perfect. Divine path is only good at one domain. The demonic shadow explained. This was not difficult to understand. Qin Hao also knew that when a martial artist comprehended the Emperor's Tao, it was a kind of extreme pursuit of martial arts. When a certain extreme was reached, the power of Tao would be born. From then on, the Tao would not rely on the spiritual qi of all things. The Emperor's Tao was mostly limited to one type. For example, what cultivated the Sword Tao and gave birth to the Sword Emperor's Tao will. Qin Hao entered the Tao through alchemy in his previous life, which was Dendi. In addition, at the peak of martial artists in the four domains, there were the Saber Emperor, the Spear Emperor, and the Slayer Emperor who entered the Tao through killing. No matter how many primordial spirits each emperor controlled, they could only maintain one Emperor's Tao in the end. Qin Hao was no exception. In this life, he had three types of soul power. However, the ancestor asked him to give up alchemy and change to swordsmanship. In the end, his Emperor's Tao was the sword. Therefore, the 9 layers of Emperor's rings contained sword will. The red lotus soul fire, dragon soul power, and tranquil water became external forces to strengthen the sword will. In this life, his Emperor's great path was the sword. However, emperors could not only have one great path. In fact, there were two. For example, the great ancestor of the divine palace, Wu Jun, comprehended the burning flame great path and the great path of meteorite, which evolved 2 rules. Qin Hao inherited Wu Jun's rules. In essence, this was not his own Tao, but he could use it. However, why did the demon god say that one should not have 2 types of divine path power at the same time? Since you have comprehended the Emperor's Tao, I will not explain the Emperor's Tao will. However, under normal circumstances, one can indeed only maintain one type of divine power. Release the second type of divine power first, and let me take a look. The demonic shadow did not understand Qin Hao's situation. He had to take a look first to be sure. I'm afraid I can't. It's not that I don't want to, but I can't freely use the second type of divine power. Qin Hao's expression was difficult. So far, he had not used the evil power once. Although he had it, he could not control it. It hurt. Chapter 1796. Beneath Uni Peak, the vengeful spirits of the supreme peak of the divine palace, as well as the vengeful spirits of the transcendent realm disciples, were suppressed. Their emperor's path was distorted, and they had taken an extreme path. The evil nature that was born could not be completely eliminated and could only be suppressed. Because the wind form of the wind had sensed the wind element, Qin Hao had to retrieve it and restore the complete power of the wind. That was why he entered the evil den, but he did not realize that the evil spirit Shang Hua's evil fetus was still being nurtured. That was the evil spirit's evil body, and it had been nurturing for 10,000 years. At that moment, Qin Hao did not have any intention of using the evil fetus. The whole process was completely involuntary. The first dragon man left a drop of blood essence in the great void cauldron, which became the divine power for Qin Hao's growth. The blood essence directly swallowed the evil fetus. He was forced to do so. Now, Qin Hao had merged with the evil fetus. Although he had obtained the evil power of Shenghua, he could not use it or even sense the existence of the evil power in his body. Only when his life was in danger, such as when the East Sea battleship was destroyed by the Thunder Will, did the evil power actively activate and protect his life. He drifted in the deep sea and was not harmed by the sea demons. Usually, Qin Hao could not use the evil power no matter what. He had tried many times. Qin Hao explained his situation clearly, and the demonic shadow fell into deep thought. After a short while, he slowly said, "It's normal. Divine power is the source of the great path, and every divine level master can only control one kind of divine power. If there are two kinds, there will be a conflict, causing the divine power to be chaotic. The divine power of the stronger divine path will suppress the weaker one. According to what you said, it is obvious that one kind of divine power in your body is suppressed by the other. However, the weak divine power will affect your strong divine power. This will be a very difficult obstacle for you to step into the divine path. Moreover, even if you cultivate the divine path, the influence will still exist and will continue to affect you, causing both divine powers to be weakened. Is there a way to break it?" Qin Hao was shocked. He did not expect the consequences to be so serious. No wonder after leaving the divine palace, he could not improve the endless samsara law. Was it hindered by the evil power? Of course there is. Everything in the world exists for a reason. Of course, since it exists, it can also be eliminated in another way. The demonic shadow's tone was quite proud. Although Qin Hao was the successor of the Dragon Man, he still had to bow before him. It was like winning the first Dragon Man. If he could help Qin Hao solve the obstruction of the two powers, he would feel very accomplished. "Senior, please teach me the way." Qin Hao bowed solemnly. "It's useless even if I teach you. Your current cultivation is too weak. You can't completely control one type of divine power, let alone two. In fact, it's not impossible to have two types of divine power at the same time. The humanoid dragon has two types of divine power, but he's strong enough to control two types of power. You're different. You're now a weak bug." The demonic shadow looked at Qin Hao with appreciation as he spoke. The more uncomfortable Qin Hao looked, the more comfortable he felt. Finally, he sighed. "Forget it. It is fate that we met. Moreover, if I help the Dragon Man integrate his divine power, he will owe me a debt. Although this debt cannot be repaid in a lifetime, I want him to feel guilty and blame himself. I want him to feel uncomfortable." Qin Hao thought. He was already dead, but he still wanted others to feel uncomfortable. Of course, he did not dare to say it out loud. In fact, he felt a little good. "Empty your mind. I will draw out the second divine power and help you completely control it. Remember my name, Sherming. When you see the Dragon Man in the future, tell him that he will never be able to pay back what he owes me." The demonic shadow let out a sky-shaking roar. The demonic hand reached out and directly pressed down on Qin Hao's head. Suddenly, the chaos shook violently. Monstrous demonic light wreaked havoc. An incomparably terrifying demonic aura invaded Qin Hao's consciousness and extended to every part of his body. The powerful demonic power seemed to have devoured the world. It roared and rolled through every one of his meridians, corroding his flesh and blood. It even corroded his 3 souls and Monarch soul. Qin Hao only felt an irresistible, terrifying aura pressing down on him, destroying everything. It evaporated his blood, cut his flesh, and destroyed his soul. It wanted to erase him from the world. An incomparably strong threat descended. He did not even have time to resist. He also forgot about the demonic shadow's instructions. At this moment, a surge of demonic power burst out from his flesh and blood. It seemed to have sensed that Qin Hao was facing a life and death crisis. pure slaughter, destruction, and resentment towards the world. All kinds of negative energies intertwined and condensed into an extreme demonic power. It wanted to take back everything and save Qin Hao from the demonic power. The demonic power burst out. The chaotic space seemed to have been ruthlessly smashed by a hammer. It crazily counterattacked the demonic power. Demonic patterns appeared on Qin Hao's face. The patterns extended wildly. As his clothes were shattered by the power, they covered every part of his body. It was like a group of ferocious tentacles firmly grasping him and stabilizing his body. It also invaded his soul and fought against the demonic power crazily. Qin Hao could not control it freely. In the face of life and death, the demonic power would appear and protect him. Therefore, the demonic shadow really wanted to kill Qin Hao. If there was a slight mistake in what he said, he would really die. However, it succeeded. Under the demonic power was forced to counterattack. Suddenly feeling this power, the demonic shadow was also shocked. He said loudly, "What a strong resentment." Even though he was the god of the demonic world, he had never seen such pure resentment. It was as if the resentment and injustice of thousands of creatures gathered in the world. It was terrifying and had great potential. Once it was completely transformed into the demonic laws, he even doubted whether he could suppress it. But for the first sovereign of the demonic world, Ming, suppressing it now was as easy as flipping his hand. Chapter 1797. The evil fetus and evil soul were separated. The former was the evil body, while the latter was the soul. The body should be controlled by the soul. Shenghua lost the evil body that he had painstakingly cultivated and was no longer complete. He could not become a god of the evil path. Now, Qin Hao had seized the evil power contained in the evil fetus. The evil power itself did not have self-awareness. When Qin Hao was in danger, it was only passively protecting its master. Who was Ming? He was the first sovereign of the demon world. When he was alive, he had mastered the true laws of the demonic way. Even if there was a trace of consciousness left in his will, it was not something that the evil power could resist. After all, the evil power in Qin Hao's body had not completely condensed into a law. The demonic might of the 10 puppets burst out, and a monstrous demonic power shrouded Qin Hao. It was like a palm that had reached into his body, firmly imprisoning the evil power so that it could no longer be hidden. The majestic demonic power gathered in countless palms, madly pulling the evil power from all over his body toward his glabella. At this moment, the evil light on Qin Hao's body was extremely strong. The evil patterns turned into thousands of threads that flowed like a stream and gathered toward his forehead. Ming needed to carve a demonic seal on Qin Hao's forehead to seal his evil power and not let it affect the divine path power of the human dragon. However, when Qin Hao needed it, he could control the evil power through the demonic seal. Thus, he could freely use 2 different kinds of divine power. Evil. With a majestic roar, Ming pointed his finger at Qin Hao's forehead. The black demonic aura on his body turned into a vortex and gathered there. It gradually flashed with a strong black luster. An ancient demonic seal slowly took shape. Endless evil power flowed into the seal. All of this should have gone smoothly. However, something unexpected happened. Beneath his finger, a ball of divine radiance of the great path suddenly erupted from Qin Hao's forehead. It was brilliant, dazzling, and incomparably intense. Moreover, its might was boundless and overbearing. It directly dispersed Ming's demonic might, causing all of his hard work to go to waste. In the dazzling divine light, an ancient seal slowly appeared. As soon as it appeared, it immediately carried a supreme, noble light. This seal was very special. It did not belong to the ancient families of the divine wilderness continent. Judging from the nature of the divine power, it did not come from the demon world or the 14 ancient gods of the human race. However, Ming recognized it. It was engraved in his heart. That was because he had seen this mark on someone else's body before. The shock in his heart was indescribable. At this moment, Shi Ming's scarlet eyes on his pitch-black face that had no facial features twisted and distorted. Following that, his imposing, demonic body trembled. The memories of his life surged like a tide. The death of the 7 kings of the demon world in battle and the destruction of the entire demon race flashed in his mind. In almost every scene, there was a figure like Qin Hao, whose forehead was shining with a strange divine splendor. It was because they were too bright and dazzling. So that was how it was. Shi Ming had still underestimated Qin Hao. The divine power of the human dragon, as well as the extreme evil power, could not compare to this divine radiance imprint. As it turned out, this junior's fate was already predetermined from the moment he was born. The place where he came from was far vaster than the 7 kings of the demon world and the 14 gods of the divine world. He himself possessed supreme divine power, and his laws were strong enough to kill gods. It was just that this bloodline power had yet to awaken. As Shi Ming formed the demonic mark on Qin Hao's forehead, his actions seemed to have touched the bottom line of his bloodline. He wanted to twist and change his bloodline, and this power finally appeared. At this moment, the killing intent in the demonic qi on Shi Ming's body was extremely strong. The destruction of the demon world was still vivid in his mind. If it was not for the human dragon's counterattack, the entire continent would have been ruled by this divine mark. His 5 fingers curled into claws, and his fingernails grew longer and longer. They emitted a sharp demonic radiance like sharp blades. With a grip, they could bury the world. Shi Ming looked at the honorable and dazzling divine splendor between Qin Hao's brows. His remaining will could not control himself to enter a battle state. It was as if he had returned to the last battlefield when he was alive. His aura was terrifying. A pair of huge demonic wings spread open, and 2 demonic horns grew from the top of his head. A pair of sinister fangs flashed on his face, and the demonic might on his body became more and more terrifying. His demonic claws reached for Qin Hao's throat inch by inch, as if he wanted to strangle him. However, when his palm was about to wrap around Qin Hao's weak throat, he saw a layer of dense dragon scales climbing up Qin Hao's face. Due to the immense pain caused by the eruption of the evil power, the blood essence of the first-generation human dragon spontaneously produced protection. The dragon's soul was awakened, and an incomparably majestic divine dragon phantom appeared in the primal chaos space. It looked down at Shi Ming, and the aura emitted by the dragon's body was very familiar to him. Perhaps this is fate. Forget it. Shi Ming let out a vicissitude laugh. He retracted his demonic claws, and his demonic wings disappeared. The palm that was about to wrap around Qin Hao's throat shifted, and his finger lightly tapped on Qin Hao's shoulder. Instantly, a majestic demonic airflow turned into a vortex and revolved around Qin Hao's shoulder. It gradually formed a demonic seal pattern that emitted a powerful demonic power. It absorbed all the evil power and imprisoned it. After doing all this, Shi Ming's illusory figure became even more ethereal and almost transparent. It was as if it would disappear with a gentle breeze. "Senior, how are you?" The evil power that invaded his consciousness was sealed, and the pain subsided. Qin Hao recovered. Throughout the entire process, he did not realize that Shi Ming wanted to kill him. Instead, he saw that Shi Ming's aura was extremely weak and knew that Shi Ming had expended a lot of energy. "I have already imprisoned the evil power for you. In the future, it will no longer affect your human dragon divine power. When you need it, you can use the demonic seal to mobilize the evil power inside you," Shi Ming said. The demonic shadow flashed again and again, and it would disappear at any time. "Thank you, Senior." Qin Hao clenched his fists. They had met by chance, and Shi Ming had helped him solve the obstacle of the divine path. He was afraid that he would not be able to repay this favor because Shi Ming had died 10,000 years ago. All that was before him was a remnant will. The difference between Shi Ming and the other sovereigns was that Shi Ming's will retained a weak consciousness. The other sovereigns were completely destroyed. It's just a small matter. Helping you is helping him. In the future, just take care of my successor. Ming pointed at Zhou Wudao, who was in a deep sleep, and said, in addition, although I have imprisoned the evil power, and you will not be affected by it, you will not be able to use both at the same time before you truly step into the divine path. When you fight with others, you can only use one of the two forms. Unless you truly step into the divine path, you will be able to slowly get used to and control them. Although the process will still be very difficult, I am very confident in you. Qin Hao's bloodline divine power was stronger, and there was no doubt about his talent. However, it was rare for him to have 3 types of divine power. It was a pity that Ming could not see the shocking scene of him using all 3 types of divine power at the same time. All right, I'm going to carry out the Demon King's inheritance for my successor. I hope there is still time. You can leave now. Ming said. The transparent, demonic shadow landed on Zhou Wudao's head and slowly sank in. I will remember Senior's kindness forever. I still have one thing that I'm puzzled about. May I ask, Senior, what is the faith of the divine path? Qin Hao hurriedly said, faith was the future of the divine path. If one could not comprehend it, they would not be able to become a god. Faith. When you become a god, you will naturally understand. Ming smiled. Qin Hao was speechless. It was equivalent to saying nothing. Then promise me one thing. No matter how the divine wilderness changes in the future, remember that you owe it the grace of being reborn. If the divine wilderness encounters a calamity one day, I hope that you can stand out and find a path to safety for all living beings in the divine wilderness. The voice of the first sovereign of the demon world, Ming, completely disappeared. The ethereal demonic shadow overlapped with Zhou Wudao. Then, black demonic qi wrapped around him, turning him into a giant black cocoon. Qin Hao watched quietly. He knew that Ming had completely left. In order to help him get rid of the divine level obstacle, Ming had used up more than half of his strength. It might affect Zhou Wudao's inheritance, but Ming did not seem to care. Since we are brothers, Zhou Wudao's inheritance is incomplete. You shouldn't blame me later, right? Qin Hao laughed foolishly. He took out a long robe from his storage ring and put on. He simply tidied it up and turned into a beam of emperor light, escaping from the primal chaos space. Next, how much of Ming's inheritance Zhou Wudao obtained would depend on his luck. Chapter 1798. At the end of the dark abyss, inside the demon gate, 7 demon god thrones stood in the shape of a ring. A demon sword was stuck in the center, and the arrangement seemed to have some other purpose. The throne that belonged to Ming was severely damaged. Other than that, the other 6 thrones were perfectly preserved. On each throne, there was a huge demon god's phantom. At this moment, Qingji Han and Zhan Yan were in the demonic eye throne and the ghostly fire throne. They were merging with the other 2 demon gods, but their merging was different from Zhou Wudao's. Even though Ming had fallen, his will still retained a weak consciousness. The other 6 demon gods only had their wills and did not have consciousness. The impact of this change would make Zhou Wudao and the other 2 merge, resulting in a huge difference. In other words, when Zhou Wudao accepted the demon god's inheritance, the entire process would be guided by Ming. He would try his best to impart the great way of the demon to Zhou Wudao. Zhou Wudao's demon way would definitely be the closest to the origin of the demon way. However, Qingji Han and Zhan Yan were not so lucky. The demonic eye throne and the ghostly fire throne had both been destroyed and lost the guidance of their consciousness. They had to rely on their own comprehension. Naturally, they were not as pure as Zhou Wudao's demon way. Moreover, the difference in talent would also make the demon way that Qingji Han and Zhan Yan comprehended different strengths. At this moment, the first princess of the East Continent, Qingji Han, was sitting cross-legged in the demonic eye throne. Her entire body was covered by the demonic eye god shadow. Above her head, a huge black eye appeared. It was her life spirit, the Eye of Devastation. The light of devastation on Qing Han's body was extremely strong. It filled the entire chaotic space and exuded a terrifying power of death. The eye of devastation floating above her head opened and shot out a ray of destructive light. It connected with the demon god's shadow and was projected into the demon god's third eye. At this moment, the majestic demon Wei power poured down from the demon god's shadow and bathed Qing Han's body. The terrifying demon Wei aura merged with her life spirit, causing the chaotic space to be filled with destructive power, even more shocking. The demonic light around Qing Han rose. Her temperament gradually changed. The demonic aura on her body was filled with demon qi, exuding a strong, murderous intent. She looked like a cold demon queen. At that moment, her life spirit, the eye of devastation, seemed to pierce through the chaotic space and see a wider world. That world was filled with darkness and bloody slaughter. An unparalleled demon suppressed all living things and became the ruler of the primordial world. Under the sweep of the demonic eye, all living things were about to be annihilated. Inside the ghostly flame throne, Zhan Yin was also absorbing the power of the demon god's flames. The black hellfire burned on his body and merged with the ghostly flames of the netherworld. His life spirit absorbed the flames of the demonic way. Zhan Yan's aura continued to grow, and he broke through to the Emperor realm. His hair danced wildly as the black flames burned his body. The three juniors who had received the inheritance of the demon world's king had their strength and temperament sublimated and transformed. Their lives had also undergone a heaven-defying change. After Qin Hao came out from the 10 nether thrones, his expression was very calm. Someone beside him asked him what had happened when he went in with Zhou Wudao. He smiled and did not answer. He only calmly looked at the 3 thrones. He knew that from today onwards, the divine wilderness would be different from before. The divine path had reappeared in the mortal world. The Emperor's path was no longer the shackles of martial arts. It was like a curse, but it was broken by Zhou Wudao's group of 3, including Qin Hao. Not long after, many gods would descend on the continent. For 10,000 years, there were no gods on the continent. Now the divine path had descended. If this had happened in the past, it would definitely have been exciting. The people of the continent would have been moved to tears. It would not have been an exaggeration to sing and sing for 10 years. But Qin Hao's heart was heavy. He knew the truth behind the divine path and the danger that came with it. Extraterrestrial experts. From Senior Shi Ming's words, he could faintly tell that the reason why the strong races from other places could descend on the divine wilderness was because they had sensed the aura of the divine path. Therefore, the first generation of man-dragons sealed the continent and cut off the aura sensing, cutting off the passage between the other planes and the divine wilderness. The 14 supreme gods of the human race paid the price of their deaths to form the power of the seal. They died along with the demon world's 7 thrones. From then on, there were no gods or demons on the continent. But once Zhou Wudao and the others broke the seal, whoever saw through the mysteries of the divine path first would break the seal from the inside out. At that time, the aura of the gods would be sensed by the extraterrestrial experts again. The battle 10,000 years ago would definitely repeat itself. Qin Hao could completely predict that it would be unavoidable. Who could not be tempted by the divine path? If Qing Han and the others could restrain their desire to enter the divine path, then in the future, there would be others who would attempt to solve the mystery of the divine path. Therefore, Senior Shi Ming called it destiny. The divine wilderness was like a cake that contained a special delicacy, attracting the extraterrestrial experts to come and fight for it. No matter what the future of the divine wilderness is like, promise me one thing. You owe it the grace of being reborn. One day, when the divine wilderness is in trouble, I hope you can stand out and find a path to safety for the people of the divine wilderness. Senior Shi Ming's instructions faintly rang in his mind. Qin Hao smiled sadly. It was not difficult to stand out, but to find a path to safety for the people of the world, could he do it? Qin Hao did not have the confidence to do it. Why did the ancient gods of primordial spirit perish? Why did the demon world's 7 thrones die? It could be imagined that unless they had no other choice, the high and mighty gods and demons would not give up their lifespans that were as glorious as the heavenly Tao. That was a choice made in extreme despair. Now, the burden was on Qin Hao's shoulders. Even though he had always been steady, he could not help but feel anxious and suffocated. There was still a long way to go. At least, Qin Hao was still far from the divine path. Qingji Han and the others would not become gods before him. Behind the demon gate, Zhou Wudao and the other two's fusion ceremony was still ongoing. Above the 3 thrones, an incomparably strong demonic light surged, and endless demonic qi flowed. Gradually, the light of 2 of the thrones dimmed until the mighty demon god phantoms disappeared. In the next moment, 2 figures walked out from the thrones. They were Qingji Han and Zhan Yan. Princess, young Master Zhan Yan, Sanmu, Tai Wei, and the other emperors all came forward with concern. Just now, the demonic light of the demonic eye throne and the ghostly fire throne was very strong. They were very worried that something bad had happened. Now that Qingji Han and Zhan Yan had returned safely, they could finally relax. In addition, everyone could see that Qingji Han and Zhan Yan's temperament had undergone a great change. Young Master Zhan Yan, how do you feel? Meng Xiang asked. He was not close to Zhan Yan, but Zhan Yan was the adopted son of the great commander of the battle tower. During this trip, Meng Xiang was mainly responsible for Zhan Yan's safety. If something happened to him, he would not be able to explain it to the battle tower. It's wonderful. Zhan Yan's eyes were bright and full of spirit. He seemed to have become much more energetic than before. It seemed that his spiritual power had been greatly strengthened. He could not express the feeling of entering the ghostly fire throne. It was very mysterious. He saw many ancient scenes. It was like a dream, but it was also very real. Chapter 1799. In a ghostly fire throne, Zhan Yan saw a demon god whose power suppressed the heavens and the earth. His demonic body was burning with ghostly fire, and every move he made could burn everything. Wherever the flames passed, everything turned into scorched earth. At that moment, his life spirit, hellfire, resonated with the ghostly fire of the demon god. They blended together, and he comprehended the great path of the demon god. Thinking of this, Zhan Yan's god's light burst out. 4 proving halos appeared under his feet. Black tongues of fire curled around him, exuding a faint demonic aura. He directly broke through 2 levels. Before entering the throne, he was in the 2nd level of Proving Way. Meng Xiang looked surprised. Zhan Yan's cultivation had improved a lot, and his hellfire had also become stronger. In addition, he exuded a faint demonic aura, and his temperament became more confident than before. In the face of this demonic aura, Meng Xiang actually felt a faint pressure. It was not a suppression of strength, but a suppression of status. It was as if he was facing a noble superior, and he couldn't help but feel inferior. A cultivator who was half a step into the true emperor realm of Proving Way felt inferior in front of Zhan Yan, who was not yet at the Proving Way level. This would never happen in the past. What do you think, Commander Meng? Zhan Yan asked with a smile. You are worthy of being the adopted son of Commander Zhan Yan. Young Master Zhan Yan is talented and has obtained the supreme fortune of the demonic way. Your future is promising. Congratulations. Meng Xiang complimented. He was not lying. Zhan Yan had indeed become very different from before. Don't put the hat of foster father on my head. I hate this kind of words the most. Without foster father, will my future be unpromising? Zhan Yan said bluntly. It was not that he was disrespectful to Zhan Yan, but he was very resistant to living under the halo of Zhan Yan, especially when he was reminded again and again. Perhaps in the past, Zhan Yan would not be so fierce as now, but he had comprehended the great path of the ghostly fire of the demon god. It was time to remove the halo of foster father. He swore that he would let Zhan Yan live under his halo in the future. When the world mentioned his name again, Zhan Yan would be proud of him. He would even surpass Luri War God. Young Master Zhan, Yin has succeeded in obtaining the great path of the demonic way. Congratulations. Are these thrones really the gods of the demonic world? Lugui said as his heart throbbed inexplicably. Before entering, Li Chuji had described the 7 thrones as 7 demonic gods. Of course, Lubi did not really think that they were gods. There was no divine path in this world. Even if there were legends about the fall of the ancient gods in the Valley of the Burial God, how could they prove that gods truly existed? Even so, the 7 thrones must belong to extremely powerful demonic cultivators. Perhaps their cultivation bases were even more terrifying than the current war god. Zhang Yin was fortunate enough to obtain such a good fortune. It was truly enviable. Unfortunately, Lugui knew that he had no chance because their Emperor Daos clashed. Qingji, what did you get? Zhang Yin ignored Liyue. He was not sure whether the demonic god shadow he saw was a supreme Dao warrior or not. All he knew was that it was very strong. At this moment, Zhang Yin was more concerned about whether Qingji Han had obtained more than him. I didn't get anything. Just like you, my cultivation level increased, and my sovereign spirit became stronger. Qingji Han's will moved slightly, and a powerful sovereign chi surged. 9 sovereign rings appeared under her feet, and a giant eye of extinction appeared in the sky. It shone with a deathly light as it looked down at everyone with an extremely powerful aura. Moreover, similar to Zhang Yin, Qingji Han's aura carried a faint demonic aura. This demonic aura made Sanmu and Taihui's hearts tremble. 8th stage of Dao validation. Congratulations, Your Highness. Sanmu exclaimed in shock. Han Qingji's Dao validation had increased by 3 tiers. She was just one more step away from becoming a Monarch Master. Sanmu could clearly sense that Han Qingji had reached the limit of the 8th tier. She could forge the 9th tier of Monarch rings at any time and complete her Dao validation. Lugui was shocked. Clearly, the princess of the Daqin Empire was more talented than Zhang Yin of the War God Temple. Before entering the thrones, Qingji Han had reached the 5th stage of Dao validation. Now, she was at the 8th stage. Qingji, you're still the best, Zhang Yin said happily. His face was full of admiration. However, he was not so comfortable in his heart. He thought that after leaving the thrones, his strength would be closer to Qingji Han's. In the end, the gap had widened. It would be even more difficult to conquer this woman. Qingji Han's opportunity is definitely more terrifying than Zhang Yan's. Now, the danger she brings to me is very strong. She is even more terrifying than when she was in the Divine Palace. Shou Wuk whispered to Qin Hao in the Divine Palace team. Qin Hao looked at Qingji Han. His 10,000 spirit fire eyes flashed. His eyes met the terrifying eye of silence in midair. Lines appeared in the depths of his eyes. He seemed to see through the essence. He found that the demonic aura contained in Qingji Han's life spirit was very similar to Shi Ming's. This proved that she had glimpsed the true great path of demon god, while Zhang Yin only had the form and had not comprehended the true essence of the demonic path. Nodding gently, Qin Hao also admitted that Qingji Han was very strong now. Even if she had not completed her Dao validation, her strength was not necessarily lower than that of a sovereign master. Even Song Yao might not be a match for Qingji Han, who was in the 8th stage of Dao validation. This woman would be very terrifying in the future. It was very likely that she would become the first supreme female demon god in the divine wilderness. With this in mind, Qin Hao turned his attention to the broken throne. Zhou Wu Dao had not yet come out of the throne of Shi Ming, which meant that the inheritance of the demon god was still in progress. Without the guidance of the demon god's consciousness, Qingji Han had glimpsed the true essence of the great path of demon god on her own. Zhou Wu Dao had Shi Ming personally teaching him, so his transformation would not be any worse than Qingji Han's. Qin Hao was looking forward to this. He did not know how much of shock the great Zhou prince would bring when he came out of the throne. At this time, Qingji Han looked in Qin Hao's direction. Just now, Qin Hao had used his 10,000 spirit fire eyes to spy on her Eye of Silence. She had naturally sensed it. Was the number 1 person in the Divine Palace beginning to fear her? Haha, 6 out of the 7 thrones are in good condition. Someone just had to choose that broken throne. Could this be what people call having eyes but failing to see? Zhang Yin followed Qing Shihan's gaze and found as she was looking at Li Chuji. It seemed that the princess of Daqin was paying special attention to the descendants of Dendi. Of course, Li Chuji's master was the first emperor of Daqin. Although he was now taken over by Empress Ling Xian and ruled the Daqin, in name, Qing Shihan and Li Chuji were naturally closer. This was normal, but Zhang Yin was still unhappy. He and Qing Shihan could be called childhood sweethearts. Could it be that in her eyes, he was now inferior to Li Chuji? Was he, Zhang Yin, inferior to Li Chuji? Previously, I promised that the best opportunities would be reserved for young Master Zhang Yin and Princess Qingji. Prince Wu Dao's father and brother are dead, and the masters of the 2 generations of the Zhou clan no longer exist. Their vitality has greatly declined. Now, he is fortunate enough to obtain the opportunity of the demon world. As for better opportunities, I dare not hope for them. Qin Hao replied and looked at Zhang Yin. He knows his limits. Zhang Yin put his hands behind his back and snorted. The best. Was Zhou Wudao worthy? Therefore, he chose the worst one. Zhang Yin could not continue to make things difficult for Zhou Wudao. Zhou Wudao was just a lowly and pitiful worm. Even if he obtained the power of the broken throne, how could it compare to his complete ghostly flame throne? Han Qingji's deep eyes flickered. She seemed to have suddenly thought of something and hurriedly looked towards the damaged throne. Her brows gradually furrowed. With Qin Hao's style of doing things, would he really let Zhou Wudao choose the worst opportunity? However, Qing Shihan could not see what was special about the throne. Other than the fact that it was broken, there was nothing else that stood out. But she would not underestimate it because of this. Her intuition told her that there must be a secret hidden in the broken throne. It was just that she cannot see through it. The truth was just as Han Qingji had expected. Just as she had this thought, the entire space suddenly trembled. An incomparably tyrannical suction force erupted from the damaged throne, forming a terrifying demonic storm that swallowed the throne. Moreover, the demonic god phantoms sitting on the remaining 4 intact thrones were actually pulled in by the demonic storm. In an instant, endless demonic aura in the world behind the demonic gate turned into a black tide and crazily surged towards the center of the storm. It was as if it wanted to sweep away all the demonic aura. Even the accumulated corpses on the ground emitted a large amount of demonic aura and gathered towards the storm. Buzz! A sword sound trembled, and the demonic sword stuck in the ground moved. Chapter 1800. The demonic sword hummed softly and became more and more intense. It began to shake violently as if it was about to be sucked in by the demonic storm. But in the end, it still stuck in its original position. It seemed that the storm had intentionally avoided it at that moment, so it was not sucked away. Qin Hao faintly sensed that the demonic sword resonated with the storm, as if it was summoned by its master and wanted to return. Could it be? Was this sword Senior Shiming's sword? But why did he give up on taking it back? Other than Qin Hao, no one paid attention to the demonic sword. Its appearance was no different from the ordinary swords of low-level martial artists. At most, the blade was black, but other than that, it looked sparse and ordinary. It did not emit any terrifying power of will. If anyone noticed it, it would be Shou Wuck. With Wuck's extraordinary understanding of swords, if Qin Hao discovered that it resonated with the storm, Wuck must have felt it too. For the others, including Meng Xiang and the other imperial lords, they were all stunned by the turbulence that occurred behind the demonic gate. The scene was too shocking. Endless demonic aura gathered toward the demonic storm, and even more demonic aura seeped into the demonic gate. It gathered from the entire dark abyss and was sucked in. The storm became more and more spectacular, exuding a suffocating demonic aura. What is going on? The demonic aura was sucked into the gate and swallowed by the storm. Even the demonic shadows of the other 4 thrones were forcefully pulled in by it. Everyone's faces were filled with confusion and shock. Only now did many people realize the power of the incomplete throne. It could actually swallow demonic shadows of the same level as it. But if that was the case, wouldn't the 4 thrones be wasted? Li Chuji followed Zhou Wudao into the incomplete throne. Later, Li Chuji came out and left Zhou Wudao alone. What happened inside? There were too many questions in everyone's mind. But at this moment, the person who reacted the most strongly was Zhang Yin. Zhang Yin absorbed the power of the dark flame throne. His temperament and cultivation had changed greatly, and his realm had increased a lot. He was about to choose another throne to make himself stronger. Now, the demonic shadows on the 4 thrones had all been forcefully pulled in by the storm. In an instant, Zhang Yin's expression turned incomparably ugly. He stared fixedly at the demonic storm. This power was terrifying. Almost unconsciously, Zhang Yin walked towards the demonic storm. He wanted to enter it. Why is young Master Zhang Yin doing this? Qin Hao stepped forward in time, blocking the other party with his tall body. Let's go in and have a look, Zhang Yin said. The demonic qi contained in the storm was too shocking, and the demonic might far exceeded that of the ghostly flame throne. At this moment, even a fool could see that the damaged throne was of a higher level than the other 6 thrones. If Zhou Wudao did not control the power of the incomplete throne, now that he had barged in, destroyed Zhou Wudao's fusion, and seized the throne, this power naturally belonged to him. Young Master Zhang Yin has already obtained a great opportunity. Right now, the Enlightenment Prince has chosen an incomplete throne and is at a critical juncture of enlightenment. You shouldn't disturb him, Qin Hao said coldly. Previously, he had let Zhang Yin choose first. At that time, he did not even look at the incomplete throne. Now, he wanted to seize it. Moreover, according to the current situation, the power of the entire ghostly abyss realm had been mobilized. It was obviously the work of the 10 nether realms. Perhaps because Qin Hao had used too much strength, it was not enough to support him to give the inheritance of the demonic god to Zhou Wudao. Therefore, the 10 nether realms had used up all the demonic qi to replenish his strength. Under such circumstances, Qin Hao could not let Zhang Yin go. The incomplete throne does not have any demonic shadows. It seems very special. I will go in and take a look. I will not do anything else. It will not affect Zhou Wudao, Zhang Yin said, but he did not mean what he said. The demonic storm is too strong. For your safety, it is better for you to stay away. Qin Hao's face was calm, and he did not budge an inch. Zhang Yin raised his eyes and glanced at Qin Hao. He did not hide the displeasure on his face. He said coldly, "You don't need to worry about my safety. Get lost." The demonic storm was so powerful that he had to go in and take a look. No one could stop him. The two faced each other and argued. Suddenly, the atmosphere became a little tense. Meng Xiang and Lu Gui immediately stepped forward and protected Zhang Yin. Meng Xiang said, "Li Chuji, get out of the way. I reminded you before to do your part. Don't meddle in other people's business." Zhang Yin's determination to enter the storm was written all over his face. He could not stop it. What if I insist on meddling? Qin Hao's voice became extremely cold. Get lost. Did Zhang Yin have the right to tell him to get lost? If it were not for his feelings for Zhang Lu, Qin Hao would have killed him before he could say the word get lost. Meng Xiang would not have had the chance to stop him. Li Chuji, understand your situation. Think about who you are facing. The life of a remnant of the great Zhou dynasty is worthless. Are you really going to go against the war god temple for him? Lu Gui Wei said, if other people's lives are worthless, then what is Commander Lu Gui's life? Qin Hao's sharp eyes looked directly at Lu Gui. What did you say? Lu Gui's face was furious. In my eyes, your life is worthless too, Qin Hao said directly. Crack. The void gate seemed to be frozen by ice. The emperors of the sacred palace, the war god guards, and even the Daqin army, including Samu and Tai Wei, were all shocked. Li Chuji said that Lu Gui's life was worthless. WWW, QBXS, XYZ, was a cheap life in his eyes. The divine general of the Sunset Peak, the Sunset War God, was worthless? At this moment, Samu and Tai Wei could not help but admire Li Chuji for being able to say this in front of Lugue himself. He had twisted the relationship to the extreme. Haha, my life is worthless. Lugue's face suddenly calmed down. Such an insult seemed to have nothing to do with him. He looked at Zhang Yin and waited quietly, as if he was waiting for the other party to give an order. Li Chuji, my war god temple did not touch you. Not because we are afraid of you, but because the war god ancestor cared about his friendship with Dindi in the past. You can cultivate peacefully in the Dao Gate. Do you really think that the Dao Gate's ancestor Bo, Changji, intimidated Ancestor Han Tian? Ha, naive. Ancestor Han Tian is afraid of my sunset peak. So, in these 3 years, the Qilin Dao Gate has been peaceful. To be clear, you are under the protection of the war god temple, so you can drag out an ignoble existence. Now everything you have is given by the war god temple. Ridiculous. Now you don't understand your own position and seniority. This is my last sentence. Scram. Take your people and scram as far as you can. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Zhang Yin put his face close to Qin Hao's ear and said, Do you believe that I won't kill you? He wanted to kill Qin Hao. If the Sunset War god did not kill him, he dared. If the battle tower did not dare to move, he dared. Today, if anyone stopped him from seizing the throne, he would make that person disappear from the world. Boom! A blood-red flame erupted, and the 9 emperor rings bloomed one after another. Under Qin Hao's feet, Dindi, who had always been calm, clenched his teeth tightly. His eyes, which seemed to be able to refine people, stared at Zhang Yin and said, You said that everything I have now was given by the war god temple. To put it bluntly, you are a beggar in front of the war god temple. Zhang Yin said arrogantly. Chapter 1801. The 4 divine generals of Daqin had rebelled, and Dinda's lineage had withered. Even though Li Chuji was a descendant of Dindi, he only enjoyed the title. If the war god great ancestor had not intimidated the East Seas Sky Shaker clan, how could he have lived until today? He was under the protection of Sunset Peak and had no idea that he was even preventing him from taking Zhou Wudao's fortune. Since that was the case, Zhang Yin did not need to show him any mercy. At this moment, the storm was still madly devouring the endless demonic qi. The pressure was getting stronger and stronger, and it was extremely turbulent. It was as if the hatred that Qin Hao had buried deep in his heart for 600 years had suddenly exploded and gone completely out of control. There was a cold smile on his face. The 9 sword rings hummed, and it was as if thousands of divine swords were shaking the void, making a rumbling sound. He stabbed his finger forward, and an extremely sharp platinum light burst out. It turned into a terrifying sword light and pierced directly towards Zhang Yan's throat. Zhou Wudao and Shi Ming were very important to Qin Hao. No matter what, he would not allow Zhang Yan to destroy them. Moreover, Zhang Yan's words had touched the bottom line of Dinda's bottom line. Everything he had today was thanks to the war god temple. How ironic and ridiculous. Then he would repay the favor and let Zhang Yin have a taste of his own medicine. The Red Lotus Overlord fire burned fiercely. The power of the soul fire merged with the sword qi. The golden fingers shot forward and turned into a flash of red and white light under Qin Hao's finger. It was extremely fast. Lugue's expression changed drastically. He did not expect Li Chusan to attack first. Suddenly, the will of the yellow spring within his body burst forth. The grayish liquid of the yellow spring surged on his fist as he blasted it forward. At that moment, the scene seemed to have turned into slow motion. The distance between Lugue and Qin Hao continued to close. However, when they were about to clash, their movements suddenly sped up. An afterimage flashed in front of Lugue, and Lugue lost his target. The will of the yellow spring on his fist blasted into the storm. However, it did not have any effect as it was swallowed up by the storm. Water, wind, God steps. Lugue's expression was extremely ugly. When he turned around to look, he saw Li Chuzin's movement technique appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Li Chuzin's sword was aimed at Zhang Yin, but it was blocked by Meng Xiang in the end. The dark elephant statue stood tall like a heavy boulder, bursting with surging monarch light. He raised his hand and punched out. Within the fist light, there seemed to be countless divine elephants crushing down on the battlefield, causing Qin Hao's body to tremble violently. The sword light at his fingertips was shattered, and he slid back a few steps. Meng Xiang also suffered a strong impact. With a muffled groan, his sturdy body fell back and collided with Zhang Yin behind him. Zhang Yin was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He pointed forward and screamed, "Kill him! Kill him!" All war god guards attacked together. As he screamed, Zhang Yin's heart trembled in fear. The moment Qin Hao rushed over, he directly passed by Lu Gui. It was too dangerous. Zhang Yin had never experienced something so frightening. Li Chuji had to die. After all, this person was different from Zhou Wu Dao. Li Chuji was a great sovereign lord who had proven his Dao and learned many of Denda's ultimate techniques. If Li Chuji did not die, Zhang Yin would not be at ease. Li Chuji, enough is enough, Meng Xiang shouted. The relationship between the two sides had not reached the point of irreconcilable. As long as they gave up on Zhou Wu Dao, Denda's descendants would still be Denda's descendants. It was not worth it to become enemies with the war god temple for an outsider. Qin Hao glanced at Meng Xiang indifferently. His voice was cold and ruthless as he said, "Those who rely on the former will be killed without mercy." This was his attitude. "Why are you talking nonsense with him? Foster father sent you all to protect me. Listen to me. Everyone attack." Zhang Yan's eyes were bloodshot as he roared hoarsely. Boom! On the other side, the team in shining armor finally moved. With orderly steps, nearly 100 war god guards formed an offensive battle formation. They let out mighty roars and charged towards Qin Hao, who was standing alone. The cultivation of the ordinary war god guards of the Sunset Peak was far from being as strong as the great sovereign lords, but most of them were at the great sovereign realm. Moreover, they were the best among great sovereigns. With nearly 100 of them charging at the same time, the momentum gathered was more majestic than an army of 1,000,000 soldiers. As a whole, Qin Hao was like a fragile leaf in the wind. Retreat. With a loud roar, Qin Hao's silver hair fluttered. His incomparably arrogant eyes stared ahead as if he was a peerless great sovereign. He stretched out his palm, and the void rumbled. Incomparably turbulent flames turned into a wall, blocking the path of the war god guards and colliding head-on with the battle formation. At this moment, the blood in Qin Hao's body tumbled and roared. The roar of a dragon shook the world. His internal organs seemed to have suffered a violent impact. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but his body didn't move at all. There was a loud boom. The battle formation formed by nearly 100 war god guards shattered and collapsed. Instantly, the team was in a mess. Many people vomited blood and were sent flying backward. The sea of flames blocked them, and no one could cross an inch. What a powerful Emperor's Dao! Sacred Lord Taihui's expression changed. Standing there alone, 100 war god guards were either dead or injured. These war god guards weren't ordinary martial artists. They were the geniuses of the East Continent that were carefully selected by the Sunset Peak. Their conditions for recruitment were even stricter than that of the various sects and academies. They were truly 1 in 1,000,000. However, they were pushed back by Li Chuji's palm. Even Taihui couldn't do this. Sigh. Meng Xiang sighed helplessly. He stepped out, running faster and faster. Every step he took left a deep imprint. The entire demonic world shook violently under his feet. Vaguely, the Emperor's chi on his body turned into an incomparably huge divine elephant that was unstoppable. Right now, except for him, no one could cross Qin Hao's line of defense. Even Lu Gui couldn't, and the number of war god guards couldn't make up for it. In fact, he didn't want to be enemies with Qin Hao, but he couldn't ignore Zhang Yan's orders. He had no choice but to act. The terrifying divine elephant's will of Wei descended. Heaven and earth seemed to have fallen under the elephant's feet. Qin Hao saw Meng Xiang's thick body leap into the air. His footsteps landed heavily. With a buzz, the great path seemed to be shattered. Dilly's huge elephant foot, which contained a wisp of true self, stepped on his head. Even his spiritual soul seemed to be suppressed by the elephant's foot. At the same time, Lugue also acted. The river of yellow spring surged. An endless will of Wei radiated. His body turned into a towering yellow spring body. He was like the yellow spring sovereign who controlled hell. He threw a punch at Qin Hao. Suddenly, the majestic gray-white river water flooded the sky and covered everything. Was his life cheap in Li Chuji's eyes? Now, he wanted to see if his cheap life could bury Dinda's descendants in the yellow spring. The two commander-level divine generals under the sunset war god attacked Qin Hao at the same time. Lugue's strength was considered extraordinary among the imperial lords. Meng Xiang was even stronger than Lugue. He was half a step into the great emperor of true self. He was invincible in the proving way. He was as strong as Jin Shun and Palace Lord Yin. Seeing this, Shou Wu's body emitted sword light. His body gradually turned into a dazzling golden sword shadow. Don't act rashly. Have you forgotten what he said? Li Wanji said. He looked at Shou Wu calmly. Along the way, Qin had told him more than once not to get involved in his dispute with Da Qin and the War God Temple. If Shou Wu attacked, it would be telling the world that the Sword Clan of the southern region declared war on the Sunset War God. Could he bear the consequences? But Shou Wu had tested Lugue's strength. He was very strong. Maybe Qin Hao could deal with him more easily. However, Lugue was not the only one attacking. Meng Xiang, who was half a step into the great emperor of true self, was also attacking. When one reached the imperial lord level, one's talent was of little use in battle. It was very worrying for one imperial will to fight against two imperial wills at the same time. It may be a tough battle. However, this guy seems to have never lost before. Let's watch and wait for the right time to attack. Li Wanji thought carefully. Shou Wu nodded. The golden sword shadow on his body dissipated. The Spirit Emperor's meaning was clear. If Qin Hao was undefeated, they didn't need to interfere. If he was at a disadvantage and showed signs of defeat, it wouldn't be too late to intervene. Although it would make Qin Hao unhappy, they couldn't just watch him be bullied. The world was so big. Offending the sunset, war god, meant death. Not necessarily. At least the Phoenix God clan dared to challenge the Sunset Peak. At worst, they could rely on the Phoenix Patriarch. The Phoenix Patriarch would be happy to accept Imperial Lords. At this moment, Qin Hao and the other two Imperial Lords were in a fierce battle. Waves of terrifying Dao might swept out, forcing many people to stay away. Da Qin, Three-Eyed Imperial Lord, and Tai Hui, Sacred Lord, didn't seem to have any intention of interfering. Just like Li Wanji and Shou Wu, they also watched the battle quietly. After all, Meng Xiang was half a step into the great emperor of true self. His strength was very reassuring. Moreover, Lugue was working together with him. If they got involved, it would seem that they were looking down on the War God Hall commander's ability. The battle was getting more and more intense. Many of the great emperors present were shocked. Meng Xiang's offensive power was extremely ferocious. Even a casual strike from the divine elephant's Dao might contain a domineering power. In comparison, Lugue's Dao body of sticks seemed to be infinitely huge and oppressive, but its great emperor's Dao might was not as strong as Meng Xiang's. Facing the two's attacks, the Dao Sect's Calamity Sword Monarch also displayed his unparalleled sword might. Through the battle, everyone was surprised to find that Li Chuji, who was also a perfected Dao Realm Master, could suppress Lubi. Even when compared to Meng Xiang, who was half-step true self, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Three-Eyed Imperial Lord and Tai Hui, Sacred Lord, were surprised. It seemed that the Imperial Dao of Dinda's descendant was more profound than they thought. He didn't retreat, even when facing two Imperial Lords. Meng Xiang and Lubi couldn't defeat Li Chuji. The battle seemed fierce, but it was also in a stalemate. Zhang couldn't help but feel angry and anxious. Li Chuji's sword was ridiculously strong. Meng Xiang couldn't take him down in a short time. This would benefit Zhou Wu Dao. If he integrated the incomplete sovereign Tao will, Zhang Yin would suffer a great loss. Tai Wei, three-eyed Imperial Lord, please help Commander Lubi take down Li Chuji. This little Imperial weapon is not enough to show my respect. After this, I will reward you. Zhang Yin took out the Imperial weapon that he got from Qin Hao. With a wave of his hand, it floated in front of three-eyed Imperial Lord and Sacred Lord Tai Wei. He asked the two Tao Realm Masters to help. This three-eyed Imperial Lord looked at Tai Wei, Sacred Lord. Princess. Sacred Lord Tai Wei wanted to ask for Qingji Han's opinion. In fact, helping Zhang Yin was a piece of cake for him. After all, Qin and the Temple of War were allied forces in this trip to the relic. Han Qingji stared at the battle intently. It was as if her soul was attached to Qin Hao's body, carefully figuring out his control and use of the will of the Emperor. Qin Hao's expression once again shocked Han Qingji. Qin Hao was the first of the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace. She hadn't seen him for 20 years, but he was strong enough to contend with a half-step Emperor of true self. Since Princess has no objections, I will help the Temple of War according to Empress Ling Xuan's instructions. Sacred Lord Tai Hui's eyes became fierce. He held the Imperial weapon in his hand and communicated with three-eyed Imperial Lord. Suddenly, he stepped into the air, and 2 halos of Tao Realm Masters bloomed below him. 2 terrifying Imperial Lord auras invaded the battle. Haha, for Imperial Lords. Li Chuji, let's see how you can hold on. Zhang Yin cursed. Zhang Yin cursed. His voice was filled with killing intent. Chapter 1802. Even the true self-Great Emperor had to be wary of the 4 Great Emperors working together. No matter how strong Li Chuji's swordsmanship was, could he be stronger than the Swordmaster of true self? Boom! Boom! The terrifying sound of the elephant's feet stomping through the sky seemed as if the heavens were about to collapse. Numerous enormous elephant foot phantoms descended from beneath the feet of the elephant and interweaved into an expanse of surging radiance that blasted down onto Qin Hao's head. Qin Hao's sword will raged around him, forming a swordway aura that enveloped him like a dazzling sword mountain, withstanding the might of the way that was pressing down from above. With every rumble of the elephant's foot, a few cracks appeared on the sword mountain. Meng Xiang was very close to the Emperor's path of true self, which indeed put a lot of pressure on Qin Hao. As for Liu Yo, although his nether body was strong, it was still limited to the path-proving realm. It was difficult for him to break through Qin Hao's Emperor will. Now, only Meng Xiang could threaten him. However, at this moment, a beam of dazzling Emperor light pierced through the void from a certain direction. Midway, it condensed into a sharp golden spear. It was extremely fast, making ear-piercing sounds. It broke through the air, carrying with it an indestructible power. In an instant, it broke into the battle. The sharp light of the spear reflected in his eyes. The Emperor will seem to pierce Qin Hao's soul. Qin Hao looked over. It was the 2 path-proving realm cultivators who were protecting Qingji Han. They were Qin's three-eyed Emperor and Tai Wei Sacred Leader. They were cultivators under Empress Ling Xian. They had also joined the battle to deal with Qin Hao alone. 4 path-proving realm cultivators against him alone. With such a lineup, shouldn't Pill Emperors feel honored? Perhaps in his previous life, Qin Hao was too lazy to care. However, his cultivation had not yet recovered to its peak. At this moment, 4 path-proving realm cultivators and Meng Xiang, who was half a step away from the true self realm, obviously could not stop them. Qin Hao knew this better than anyone else. It seemed that Zhang Yan's move was not only to seize Zhou Wudao's fortune, but also to kill Qin Hao. Senior Shi Ming helped me control the extreme evil power. I wonder if the dragon spirit can stop the 2 of them. Qin Hao himself could control evil power. With his 9 flawless Emperor rings as a foundation, he had no problem dealing with three-eyed and Tai Wei. The dragon spirit's ability was similar to Qin Hao's, but their Emperor spirits and foundations were fundamentally different. It would not be easy to fight against two Emperor Masters. However, there was no other way. The threat of four Dao confirming sovereign lords was too great. Qin Hao could not hold back any longer. He made up his mind and was about to summon his Dharma idol to fight. Whoosh! Qin Hao's heart trembled at the sound of a sword whistling through the air. He looked up and saw a dazzling golden sword shadow flying toward him from the direction of the Sacred Palace team. It was even faster than the golden battle spear, and it struck first. With a loud clang, the sword shadow exploded and collided with the battle spear. Dazzling light exploded in the void, and then the terrifying aftershock of the Emperor's light swept out, forcing Lu Gui to dodge in a hurry. At this moment, a peerless figure floated in front of Qin Hao like a sword immortal. It was Shou Wuk of the southern region, Sword Master Jinji. Shou Wuk directly entered the battle and blocked the Daqin expert Tai Wei. Don't try to persuade me anymore. I will do my own thing. It has nothing to do with you, Shou Wuk said calmly. Without turning his head, he directly blocked Qin Hao's next words. You rascal. Qin Hao chuckled helplessly. A warm current surged in his heart. He was touched. I am Li Wanji of the Li family of the proud God Empire in the southern region. I have always admired the overlords of Daqin. Today, I would like to exchange a few moves with the Sword Master Jinji. Li Wanji's figure slowly descended and stood side by side with Shou Wuk. They blocked in front of the three-eyed sovereign and Tai Wei. He introduced himself and said that he admired the overlords of Daqin, so he came to exchange pointers. There was nothing wrong with it. However, his intention was obvious. He did not want the three-eyed sovereign and Tai Wei to interfere with Qin Hao's battle. Do you two know what you're doing? The three-eyed sovereign said coldly. Please. Li Wanji changed his style and stopped talking. He grabbed downward in the void. Two extremely majestic skeletons flew out of the endless corpses. There were also two well-preserved skeletons, but they were still incomplete. Then, as the Overlord light circled around his hand, he scribbled on the skeletons. The Overlord light merged into the skeletons, and suddenly, mysterious light bloomed. The two giant skeletons seemed to come to life. Extremely strange light flashed in the empty eye sockets of the skeletons. A storm of Overlord light rose around them. 9 layers of Overlord rings flashed under the two skeletons. Everyone's eyes widened as if they had seen a ghost. This random scribbling seemed to resonate with the skeletons. Li Wanji created 2 skeletons out of thin air. Then, he wielded the broken bone knife and directly slashed at the three-eyed sovereign's head without any pattern. It was the unique skill of Empress Xiantian, the supreme overlord technique of Xiantian Peak, the enchantment scripture. You are courting death. The three-eyed sovereign's heart skipped a beat when he saw this strange scene. However, the temperament of an overlord was not something ordinary people could compare to. Moreover, he was good at eye techniques and could see through illusions. He almost immediately sensed that the 2 skeletons were not the real Overlord skeletons. They were supported by Li Wanji's Overlord will. Their combat strength was extremely limited. At best, they were not even as strong as an 8th-tier Overlord of the Dao Proving Realm. Especially the 2 tall skeletons. They were waving the bone parts that they had pulled from one of their companions. They slashed at the three-eyed sovereign without any pattern. It was simply an eyesore. The three-eyed sovereign seemed to have been greatly insulted at this moment. He directly punched forward. He did not even bother to open his divine eyes of illumination. The terrifying Overlord fist swept out like a storm. It tore the 2 skeletons into nothingness. Again, Li Wanji's face turned slightly pale. Every enchantment consumed his Overlord will. Naturally, he would be affected when the tools were destroyed. However, his eyes were extremely firm and his speed was extremely fast. The moment the three-eyed sovereign crushed the 2 skeletons, another 2 skeletons appeared in the next second. They stepped on the 9 layers of Overlord rings and held the thigh bones of other skeletons in their hands. They smashed toward the three-eyed sovereign's head like sticks. Scram! The three-eyed sovereign roared angrily. How could Li Wanji be worthy of being called an overlord? The skeletons kept appearing one after another. In a short period of time, 20 to 30 skeletons formed an overlord army and surrounded the three-eyed sovereign. The power of the universe Earth in Li Wanji's overlord body continuously replenished his energy. Even though his aura was rapidly weakening, his hands were still tirelessly drawing strange patterns one after another. If one was not enough, he would draw two. If two were not enough, he would draw 20. He would exhaust the three-eyed sovereign. The first empire of the East Continent, Daqin, the spirit emperor of the southern region, had won this battle. Your sword is very sharp. On the other side, Sacred Lord Tai Wei looked at Shou Wuk solemnly. His opponent's overlord sword was very special. There were not many people in the East Continent who could break his divine spear head-on. Moreover, Shou Wuk had not only broken his spear, but also destroyed it. Your spear seems to be indestructible, Shou Wuk said solemnly. He could feel that Emperor Tai Hui's cultivation was not below Lubi's. His combat power must be extraordinary. The space seemed to be frozen. The two of them looked at each other seriously. After a few breaths, Shou Wuk and Tai Hui's figures flew up at the same time. They kept climbing until they broke away from the battle between Qin Hao and Meng Xiang. There was never any need for superfluous words between real opponents. Shou Wuk's sword and Tai Hui's spear had similar attributes. It was like a battle between two kings. In the next moment, an extremely turbulent stream of sword will exploded above them. Xiaogua and the others saw countless golden sword shadows streaking across the sky, turning into a storm of sword will. On the opposite side, Sacred Lord Tai Wei raised his hand. His emperor will radiated. Countless golden battle spears appeared behind him, covering the sky and the sun. They turned into turbulent light and shadows, overlapping and colliding with the storm of sword will. Extremely intense and violent sounds drowned out everyone's ears. At this moment, the world seemed to be collapsing. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Who would have thought that there would be such a peerless sword will in the southern region? Elder Tian Yun from the Holy Palace side. Compared to Head Wu Kei, Feng Qianli, a disciple of the Zhuang Sword Emperor, and Feng Shengshi, who was known as the #1 swordsman in the East Continent, were all indifferent. These two represented the future of sword will in the East Continent. They are holding back Three Eye and Sacred Lord Tai Wei. Granny, what should we do? Qian Ning looked at Elder Tian Yun. After entering the relic, Qin Hao had taken good care of the people of the Holy Palace. He had given them many treasures and opportunities. Now was the time when Qin Hao needed help. Elder Tian Yun should at least help him hold back Lupi. After all, Meng Xiang's strength was quite worrying. Tian Yun knew that even without Three-Eyed and Sacred Lord Tai Hui, Commander Luo alone was enough to put pressure on Calamity, Sword Emperor. In this case, Zhang Yin only needed to mobilize a few 8-stage Dao Vindication experts to cross the defense line and destroy Zhou Wudao's inheritance. Unfortunately, the Sacred Palace was too weak compared to Daqin and the War God Temple. She was not qualified to make decisions on behalf of the Sacred Palace. Let's wait and see. If necessary, I will help. A delicate voice sounded softly. It seemed to have magic. Suddenly, all the fairies in the Sacred Palace looked at one person. Human Sovereign Wu Yu. Great. If you're willing to help, Sacred Lordly will be fine. Tian Yun rejoiced. Actually, in her heart, she also hoped that she could do something for Qin Hao. Otherwise, she would feel guilty. Thank you. Qian Ning bowed slightly to Wu Yu. Her movement was so small that no one could see it. Silly girl. Wu Yu smiled and looked at Qian Ning. There was no need to be polite with her. She should help. Li Chuji, give up. You're not worth it. If we continue to fight, I will not be able to control my power. Meng Xiang let out a majestic roar. His square face was full of dominance. The true self-emperor, while on his body, grew stronger as if he was about to break through. He seemed to be suppressing his emperor might. Whether it is worth it or not, we will know after the battle. Let's fight fair and square. Supreme Emperor Lord, Commander Luo. Qin Hao looked up. Half-step true self? Meng Xiang was indeed half-step true self, because he had been suppressing his emperor will. He did not want to step into that realm completely. In fact, Meng Xiang's real situation was the same as when Jin Shun fought Palace Lord Yin. He had comprehended the emperor's way and could become a true self-emperor at any time. Even so, what was the harm? Qin Hao's 9 emperor rings were all flawless. His emperor soul was even stronger. The 10 Cs helped him control evil power. He could transform into the evil emperor's body. Why should he be afraid of a true self-emperor? Chapter 1803. At that moment, Meng Xiang's god's light was getting stronger and stronger. His aura was filled with great Tao true will. His slightly twisted face looked at Qin Hao. In this battle, his power was triggered by Catastrophe's Sword Emperor, and he could no longer suppress it. He was about to break through and become a lord of true self. It shouldn't be like this. He suppressed his emperor's will for another reason. His final target was Empress Ziwei of the Eastern Sea. However, before he suppressed Mu Yuwei, Qin Hao caused his emperor's will to go berserk. Now, he had no choice but to break through. This trump card should have been left for Mu Yuwei, but Qin Hao revealed it in advance. Buzz! The great Tao rumbled in the void, and the heavens shook violently. Terrifying elephant trumpeting came from Meng Xiang's body. It was extremely loud, as if thousands of elephants were worshipping him. It was solemn and sacred, and it shook everyone's eardrums and divine soul. An extremely terrifying Tao might spread from the void, radiating towards the entire nether abyss demonic zone. Suddenly, the heavens and earth resonated, and the great Tao hummed together. Qin Hao looked up. Meng Xiang was surrounded by sacred emperor's light. It was dazzling, as if an unparalleled great emperor was looking down on the world. The emperor's will flowing around his body became more and more turbulent. He was about to break through the restraints of Tao and reach another level. Countless people looked up at the sky. Meng Xiang's aura was suffocating. Shou Wuk, Tai Hui, San Mu, and the other great emperors were all affected. They felt that their Tao was being suppressed by an unparalleled Tao might. They couldn't help but feel respect. "This is bad," Goddess Wu muttered. She was always calm, but now she looked worried. Once Meng Xiang broke through to the true self realm, even she wouldn't be able to stop him. Qian Ning saw Wu Yu's expression and became even more nervous. If even Wu Yu couldn't do anything, Qin Hao's situation would be very dangerous. Could it be that Dinda's history was going to repeat itself? 600 years later, he would die in the Valley of God burial again? The great Tao hummed, and the elephant trumpeting reverberated. Strange phenomena appeared in the sky. Dazzling emperor's light radiated from Meng Xiang's body to the nether abyss demonic zone, illuminating the heavens and earth. In the sky, a terrifying cloud of catastrophe of the great path was born, covering the top of Meng Xiang's head. The light of catastrophe flashed, and terrifying lightning intertwined. With a crack, the sound of thunder shook the heavens and the earth, and an incomparably turbulent beam of light pressed down mercilessly towards Meng Xiang. Emperor, tribulation, Tao verification, true self, unblemished, nirvana. These were the 4 realms of the Emperor Tao. Each realm had its own Emperor Tribulation. After being baptized by the Monarch Tribulation, a martial artist could forge a supreme monarch physique and become a true self great emperor. There were 36 heavenly Emperor Tribulations. The true self Emperor Tribulation had 3 stages. However, the 3 stages of the Emperor's Tribulation were far more terrifying than the 36 stages. Rumble. Light pillars rained down from the sky, and the entire nether abyss demonic region trembled. Countless dark mountains crumbled, and thousands of corpses evaporated. The incomparably terrifying monarch light blasted onto Meng Xiang's body, and a deafening elephant roar erupted from his body. His armor was instantly shattered. An endless light of calamity flowed through his body and surrounded Meng Xiang, seeping into his flesh, blood, meridians, and even his divine soul. It seemed like even his divine soul would be destroyed. Meng Xiang clenched his teeth as his monarch aura burst out. The golden-white monarch aura on his body was extremely intense. His skin turned into a metallic color as if it had been forged into a Vajra body. He stood in the light of calamity and forcefully withstood the bombardment. This scene was extremely shocking. Three-eyed, Li Wanji and the others all stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky, their blood boiling. Everyone witnessed the true self great emperor's tribulation. Rumble. The second stage of the light of calamity from the great path tribulation cloud was even more ferocious than before. A circular light pillar fell and kept expanding outwards, occupying the entire sky and covering the entire nether abyss. The second light of calamity fell very slowly, but the power of calamity locked onto the person undergoing the tribulation. Meng Xiang seemed to be imprisoned and had nowhere to hide. Retreat. Sacred Lord Tai Wei shouted as he flashed to Qing Jihan's side, grabbed her, and ran away. All the divine war guards and the black armor army of Daqin quickly retreated away from this area to avoid being involved in the light of calamity. Retreat. Fairy Wuyo, the emperors of the sacred palace, Caiogua, and the others also retreated. The light of calamity radiated too wide, and its power was simply unimaginable. Everyone was retreating, including Shou Wuk, Li Wanji, Three-Eyed, and Lu Gui. They all escaped from this area. However, only one person stood in the air below Meng Xiang. Qin Hao was guarding the demonic path storm, not leaving even an inch. Roar. Meng Xiang clenched his fists as an angry roar came from his throat. He raised his head and looked at the light of calamity slowly falling from the sky. Heaven and earth were filled with a terrifying aura of destruction. His inner shirt exploded at this moment, revealing strong bronze skin and bulging muscles. He lowered his head and looked at Qin Hao. Then, his body went against the sky and rushed towards the light of calamity. He was a responsible man. Qin Hao looked up and praised. Putting aside the standpoints of both sides, he admired Meng Xiang more and more. Meng Xiang took the initiative to face the power of calamity, obviously not wanting to affect him. At this moment, Meng Xiang took the initiative to throw himself into the infinite power of calamity. The light of calamity covering the sky suddenly gathered like a crazily shrinking light cocoon, swallowing and wrapping around him. The light was too strong. At this moment, no one could see what was happening clearly. They could only hear the violent sound of thunder in the sky. The continuous rumbling and explosions shook their eardrums. When the light of calamity dissipated, a bloody figure was revealed. It was Meng Xiang. Meng Xiang was covered in blood and flesh. His aura was weak, as if he had been severely injured. His imperial body was almost destroyed by the power of calamity. Li Wanji and the others were deeply shocked. Was this the calamity of the great emperor of true self? The power just now was nearly 10 times stronger than the imperial calamity of Proving Path. Thinking that they would also face such a calamity in the future, they could not help but feel their hearts beat wildly. Qin Hao's 10,000 spirit fire eyes flashed. He was the only one who could see clearly that Meng Xiang had withstood the power of calamity. Although the process was short, it was not easy. However, he knew that the third calamity of the 3 calamities of true self was the calamity of life. The first 2 calamities were the calamities of form. After withstanding the calamity of life, one would be able to find the true self and master the true meaning of the great path. If he could not withstand it, Meng Xiang would be annihilated and his life's cultivation would be destroyed. Cultivation was so cruel. The closer one was to the heavenly path, the higher the danger. If a low-level warrior failed to break through, he would not be hurt. If an emperor failed, his body and soul would be destroyed. Buzz! Above the vault of heaven, the mighty calamity clouds rotated. What happened next was not more terrifying than imagined, and no light of calamity overflowed. However, the more it was like this, the more frightening it was. After all, The emperors present had not experienced the calamity of the great emperor of true self. Even if they had felt the power of the great emperor of true self, they did not know how his power was formed. The calamity clouds became abnormally calm, as if an ordinary dark cloud was floating. Compared to the intense scene just now, it was so calm that it made people feel uncomfortable. However, an extremely terrifying aura was slowly being nurtured inside the calamity clouds. Showuk realized that this aura was exactly the same as Meng Xiang's, as if it was born from the same mother's womb. What exactly was it? It was here, Qin Hao murmured. Only the third calamity was worthy of being called the true self. Whoosh! There was no light of calamity descending, but a figure descended from the calamity clouds. It was thick and sturdy, and its bones were thick and solid. It was like a heavy 10,000-year-old boulder. The moment they saw this figure, screams rang out. This body was Meng Xiang, the second Commander Luo that was nurtured by the calamity clouds. Unimaginable. So that's how it is. Surpass oneself and achieve the true self. This is the true meaning of the Great Path. Fake, be destroyed. Meng Xiang's body was dyed red with blood. It was a shocking sight. The originally weak Meng Xiang exploded with an unprecedented battle intent when he encountered the other him. His aura was still weak. After all, he had been injured by the calamity. However, at this moment, everyone could feel the blazing battle intent of Meng Xiang. It was extremely fanatical. This intent infected everyone. Xiaogua and the others were immersed in it, and their blood boiled madly. However, the two Meng Xiang met in the air, one above and one below. They reached out their fists and collided. Immediately, sacred and bright light exploded. In the void, the divine elephant with halos around it was born. Its body was as tall as a mountain, suppressing everything, and it trumpeted to the sky. After the trumpeting, the space returned to calm. From the shadow of the divine elephant, a figure slowly walked out. His body glowed with the light of the Great Path, and his eyes were as bright as a god's. Meng Xiang's entire temperament changed. His square face faintly became handsome, and he looked younger. His sturdy body was slender, and only his skin was still bronze. The true self, Great Emperor. Showuk looked at the godlike Meng Xiang. The 9 emperor's rings under his feet spun slowly, and his aura became unfathomable. However, the difference was that another emperor's ring also appeared behind Meng Xiang. There seemed to be a vague shadow in the emperor's ring that resembled Meng Xiang himself. This was the true self, Great Emperor. So far, this group of juniors who had walked out of the Divine Palace had never seen the true self, Great Emperor, display his full power. Surpassing oneself and achieving the true self was the true meaning of the Great Path. This sentence, uttered by Meng Xiang when he was going through the calamity, deeply affected everyone. It became a firm belief for Xiaogua and the others to pursue the true self-emperor's path. Congratulations, Commander Luo. The god of war guards in the sky shouted in unison. Congratulations, Commander Luo, for becoming the supreme emperor. Congratulations. After Samu and Tai Hui congratulated him, Lu Guwei followed suit. Although he felt uncomfortable seeing Meng Xiang successfully enter the higher emperor realm, Lu Guwei knew that from now on, Meng Xiang's status in the Sunset Peak would be very different from before. After all, his strength was obvious. Perhaps the god of war would not bestow the position of the 4th commander. Even so, Meng Xiang's status was not much lower than the 3 from the battle tower. Perhaps in the future, when Lu Guwei saw Meng Xiang, he would have to call him his subordinate. Congratulations, Commander Luo. You're simply too powerful now. Hurry up and take down Li Chuji for me. Zhang Yin was pleasantly surprised. He was even more excited than Meng Xiang himself. This was because if Meng Xiang attacked again, the Calamity Sword Emperor would definitely be defeated. The demonic storm inheritance would belong to Zhang Yin. This was something to be happy about. Meng Xiang glanced at Zhang Yin indifferently. He stood on the 9 emperor's rings, and the halo of the Great Path behind him was extremely sacred. He was like a god who looked down on the mortal world. Even Zhang Yin was no different from an ant in his eyes, because now Zhang Yin had no right to order him around. Even the battle tower had lost the ability to restrain Meng Xiang. Of course, this was only a name. However, Meng Xiang did not dare to be arrogant. He did not think that his status was higher than the battle tower. The two had different identities. Now that I have reached the true self level, I have no obligation to continue protecting you. According to the highest order of the War God Temple, my next task is to go to the core palace of the Valley of the Gods and find the whereabouts of Empress Sui. Meng Xiang said bluntly. Beside him, Zhang Yan's expression turned ugly. But before I leave, I will do my best for the Lord of the Battle Tower. Meng Xiang said again. Thank you, Commander Luo. I'm very grateful. Zhang Yan was very sensible and hurriedly bowed. Then Meng Xiang's figure descended and slowly came to Qin Hao. The halo behind him was extremely bright and emitted a strong sense of oppression. He said indifferently, you can still hold on against a half-step true self level. Do you still need to fight? Meng Xiang's voice contained the Tao might of true self. It rolled forward and completely suppressed Qin Hao's Tao proving realm aura. Even though the 9 Emperor's rings of swords still shone under Meng Xiang's feet, they were much dimmer. How would you know if you don't try? Qin Hao smiled faintly. He pointed his finger forward, and a wisp of platinum sword light shot out from his fingertip. The flame-like sword qi pierced Meng Xiang's forehead. Chapter 1804. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio. The Divine General had fallen. Was there a need to fight? Meng Xiang had grasped the true meaning of the Great Path and was fighting with a Tao-proving emperor. In the eyes of ordinary people, there was no doubt that a Tao-proving emperor could not defeat a true self. However, Qin Hao said that he would never know if he did not try. In the next moment, he attacked directly, and the sword will at his fingertips pierced toward Meng Xiang's forehead. He was fighting a true self great emperor with the posture of a Tao-proving emperor. Too slow and too weak. Meng Xiang stood tall and motionless. The halo of the Great Path behind him was dazzling and majestic. Now, Qin Hao was almost no threat to him. Why would he need to avoid the attack of a Tao-proving emperor? However, he still challenged him even though he knew that he had no chance of winning. His courage was admirable. If he admitted defeat directly, Dinda's descendants would be disappointed. At this time, Meng Xiang did not move at all, but a light flashed in his eyes. The terrifying dilly surged from his body. When the sword light flew over, it seemed to have encountered an unparalleled force and was annihilated directly. The true self destroyed the Tao-proving emperor's will. Qin Hao was not surprised. The emperor's light flowed under his feet like 2 gusts of wind. His body moved forward with the wind, ethereal and illusory, making it difficult to distinguish his intentions. At this moment, the sword will in the space rang, and millions of sword chi rushed toward Meng Xiang, forming a great path sword momentum. Tens of thousands of swords followed Qin Hao's body. Water, wind, godly steps. I will not kill you, but I will subdue you and send you directly to Sunset Peak. Meng Xiang's eyes looked forward. The eyes of the true self-emperor seemed to see through all illusions. Although Li Chuji's movements were mysterious and unpredictable, he was not in the same realm and could not confuse him. Meng Xiang stepped forward, and the great path trembled. The endless light under his fist struck forward. Tens of thousands of elephants cried, and the terrifying sound waves buried the sky, suppressing the tens of thousands of sword sounds. Qin Hao was drowned by the fist aura. Boom! It was as if the true power of the great path had blasted into his body. It was heavy and unbearable. Qin Hao's illusory figure suddenly appeared. He was blasted down by the punch and fell to the ground. In the face of absolute strength, even the most profound movement techniques were gaudy and useless. The difference between Great Emperor True Self and half-step Great Emperor True Self is indeed like heaven and earth. Qin Hao's body was suppressed by the heavy force of the fist, and his meridians and blood were boiling. The demonic flame on his body erupted, and his falling momentum suddenly slowed down. Then he rose into the air, breaking through the restraints of the fist, like a huge, flaming meteor, and rushed toward Meng Xiang again. Emperor's Dao loss. Meng Xiang's expression did not change. When he fought with Qin Hao earlier, neither of them had used the power of rules. At that time, Dinda's descendants were already able to contend with half-step true self-cultivators. Meng Xiang could sense that Li Chuji's Emperor's Ring was very special. It was far stronger than that of other emperors. Now, Li Chuji obviously felt the tremendous power and naturally would not hold back. The blazing meteor blasted over with a whistling sound. It was like a huge sword chi, dragging an extremely long light shadow behind it. Waves of fire spread out, burning through the space. Meng Xiang nodded approvingly. This attack was enough to kill ordinary emperors, but in front of him, it was far from enough. Among the 9 layers of Emperor's rings under Meng Xiang, the 3 Emperor's rings inside began to operate. A majestic dilly flowed out, winding along his body. The Emperor's light on his body became even stronger, and the sky rumbled under his Emperor's chi. Then he punched out again, and a golden divine elephant rushed down from the void, stepping on the void and colliding with the meteor. When the 2 sides collided, the sky seemed to explode, and dense cracks appeared. The ground of the abyss below sank dozens of feet with a boom. Countless people watched, their hearts trembling. This was like a confrontation between gods, and even the great path collapsed and shattered. He is completely suppressed by Meng Xiang. Shouk said softly. Qin Hao's Emperor's Qi had been firmly suppressed. In front of the great Emperor of True Self, a proven emperor was so weak. Even Qin Hao, who had been trained by the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace, was at an absolute disadvantage. Although Shouk could feel that Qin Hao still had some strength left, was Meng Xiang not the same? The 3 layers of Emperor's rings had directly broken the rules of Proving Way, and Meng Xiang himself had not even used the rules of True Self. The difference was too obvious. Even Shouk did not know how Qin Hao could defeat Meng Xiang, who was in the realm of True Self. Boom! Meng Xiang punched back again, and this time, the power of the punch was much more ferocious than before. Qin Hao spat out a trace of blood as he fell madly. He had used all of his 9 layers of unblemished Emperor's path and used the meteor rules, but he could not compete with the great Emperor of True Self. It seemed that he had been overconfident. Thinking of this, dense scales grew from Qin Hao's flesh and blood, slowly covering the surface of his body. The power of the dragon's soul was awakened, and the sound of bones growing violently came from his body. As he fell, Qin Hao's body gradually grew larger, and his aura began to rise, and his Emperor's Qi became more and more astonishing. Even so, no one was optimistic about him, especially the War God Temple. The War God Guards did not believe that a proven emperor could defeat the great Emperor of True Self. That was unrealistic. No matter how much Li Chuji struggled, he would be suppressed by Commander Luo. At this time, Lu Gui's eyes narrowed, and 2 sharp lights shot out from his pupils. His attention shifted from the battle to the demonic storm. Meng Xiang had stepped into the realm of True Self and completely suppressed Li Chuji. At this time, should he go and perform? If he destroyed the Demon King's inheritance and pulled Zhou Wudao out of the storm, it would be considered a merit. Although this merit was not worth mentioning compared to Meng Xiang's step into the realm of True Self, it would more or less win Zhang Yan's favor. In terms of status, Lu Gui was not as good as Commander Luo's in the future. However, if he stabilized his relationship with Zhang Yan, he could at least get some preferential treatment and privileges from Lord Zhang, Lu laughing coldly in his heart. Lu Gui's body suddenly swept toward the storm. Everyone was watching the battle. Samu and Tai Hui stopped fighting and carefully watched the battle between the proven Emperor of True Self and the great Emperor of True Self. At this time, Lu Gui attacked unexpectedly. By the time he was discovered, it was already too late to stop him. Stop! Showuk shouted angrily and moved at the same time with Li Wanji. The two wanted to tear the space and teleport to stop him. However, two rays of Emperor's light fell, and Sanmu and Tai Wei stood in front of them. There was no need for nonsense. In an instant, the four rays of Emperor's light fell into a fierce battle again. "Well done, Commander Luge." Zhang Yin looked at the figure flying toward the storm and couldn't help but praise him. He was smart enough. If he successfully caught Zhou Wudao, he must let his foster father reward Lugue. "Master." Qian Ning looked at Wu Yo. In a hurry, she accidentally exposed the other's identity. She was the palace master of the sacred palace, Empress Shui Yao. "It's too late." Shui Yao sighed slightly. The gap between their realms was not big. Even though she was stronger than Emperor Lugue, the other had taken the initiative. It was useless for her to rush over. In front of the demonic storm, Li Chuji and Meng Xiang were fighting fiercely. Both of them had amazing combat power. Who would have thought that Lugue would break through and not be afraid of being affected? Now, the only person who could stop Lugue was Li Chuji of the Taoist sect. Because his position was closest to the demonic storm, he had been guarding there. However, Shui Yao didn't think that Li Chuji had the strength to stop Lugue. Meng Xiang had completely stepped into true self, and his cultivation was much stronger than a half-step true self. Li Chuji couldn't handle it himself. So how could he stop Lugue? Perhaps this was Zhou Wudao's fate. His father and brother had died tragically, and the two generations of experts in the family had been slaughtered. Now, even the Demon King's inheritance that he had luckily obtained could not be kept. Soon, the great Zhou dynasty would be removed from the East Continent. Whoosh! A white shadow appeared from her beautiful eyes. It was so fast that Shui Yao couldn't see what it was. Although she had failed to achieve true self-enlightenment, it didn't mean that her cultivation was weak. On the contrary, Shui Yao was very strong. Her Emperor's Tao was even stronger than Jin Chen's before he broke through. However, at this moment, her Emperor's will couldn't capture the white shadow at all. It seemed to have left Qin Hao's body. What was that? Shui Yao naturally didn't know that the white shadow was Qin Hao's Emperor's Dharma form. As she said, Qin Hao was closest to the demonic storm and was most likely to stop Lugue. However, she didn't think that he had the strength to do so. In fact, Qin Hao did. Almost as soon as Lugue moved, Qin Hao sensed his intentions. Although Meng Xiang gave him great pressure, Qin Hao's sovereign spirit was constantly sensing the entire world behind the demonic gate. How could he let Lugue take advantage of this? In the blink of an eye, without any hesitation, the dragon spirit Dharma power left his body and blocked Lugue's path. What happened next was extremely shocking, causing everyone's eyes to widen. It was an unforgettable experience. Shifting positions, Qin Hao's body was still rushing toward Meng Xiang, the true self-great emperor. After the awakening of the dragon spirit, his physical body, sovereign spirit, and emperor's will had all been greatly improved. Although his realm wasn't as high as Meng Xiang's, the strength of their auras was infinitely close. Faintly, Qin Hao was no longer suppressed by his opponent's true self-will. Moreover, as he issued an order, the white figure in front of Lugue transformed into Qin Hao's true body. The figure that was charging toward Meng Xiang had a majestic body that was covered in scales. In fact, it was the dragon spirit. In an instant, the two exchanged positions, ignoring the space constraints of the Great Path. In order to win Qin Hao's favor, Lugue wanted to steal Zhou Wudao's inheritance from under his nose and destroy Senior Shi Ming's Demon King succession ceremony. Then die. At this moment, the golden emperor light on Qin Hao's body dissipated, and the sword will disappeared. Even the 9 sword rings under his feet disappeared. In their place was a ruthless face branded with evil black patterns. It was cruel, greedy, and evil. It seemed to have an extreme hatred for the world. The emperor's aura that was originally inclusive of all things became an evil aura in an instant. It was as if all the evil thoughts in the world were gathered in this aura. The power of the evil fetus transformed into the evil emperor body. Chapter 1805. The great path of space was tainted by the evil chi. All kinds of sounds were intertwined. There were screams, cries, howls, and roars. It was a mess. It was as if all kinds of sick lunatics were venting their negative emotions. Every sound was filled with hatred. These sounds intertwined and surged into everyone's minds. They seemed to be able to tear their brains and souls apart. In an instant, the war god guards of Sunset Peak and the black armor army of Daqin covered their ears in pain. Their eyes were bloodshot. At this moment, Qin Hao was completely different in everyone's eyes. His temperament had changed drastically. Shou Wuk, Xiaogua, and the others watched from afar. Their faces were filled with shock and fear. They would never forget the scene of the divine palace being destroyed. Now, Qin Hao looked exactly like Shenghua. His body was shrouded in an ashen, evil qi. His body was branded with countless distorted human faces. Behind him, the deformed heads formed by evil qi were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. He had become a completely different person. He was like a vessel that carried the ultimate evil in the world. This power is the evil soul, Shenghua. Qingji Han's heart trembled violently. Her pale hands were clenched together. Her uneasiness and nervousness condensed into an uncontrollable fear. The scene from her nightmare appeared again. The shadow in her heart was magnified. It was as if she had returned to the day in the divine palace. Yu Luguwei kept retreating. His face was filled with shock. He didn't know what had happened to Li Chuji, but this aura was extremely dangerous. Whoosh! Qin Hao waved his arm casually. The corners of his mouth curled up in a mocking and cruel sneer. The abnormally long human heads behind him transformed into countless large hands, covering the sky and covering the earth as they bit towards Lubi. At this moment, the will of the emperor was controlled by the evil power. His mind and personality changed. It seemed that Qin Hao was like Shenghua. He began to enjoy causing fear in others. However, his consciousness was very clear. His thoughts and memories had not changed. If not for this, he would even suspect that he was the reincarnation of an alchemy emperor. Or perhaps he was actually another person. The current him was his true self. Endless deformed heads swept over. The faces were crying, laughing, and screaming. They seemed to want to bury Lu Guwei. The evil power sealed the great path of space. Lu Guwei couldn't break open the space. He couldn't escape. In this instant, an unprecedented crisis struck. Lucan still maintained his instincts amidst his panic. His facial features were alarmed, and he subconsciously released the Yellow Springs Tao physique. Boundless grayish-white liquid pervaded the air, converging to form a surging Yellow Springs river. The waves drowned out the void as they moved forward against the flow. Each wave was higher than the last, and it was like a tsunami that swallowed the heavens. It wanted to melt countless sinister and terrifying heads from the world. Human heads howled, screamed, and laughed maniacally were tossed into the river of the Yellow Springs. The laws of the evil path formed from extreme resentment actually ignored Emperor Lucan's Tao intent. They clearly touched each other, yet they seemed to exist in two different spaces. They directly passed through the waves and landed on Lucan's body. Lu Guwei's gradually towering body suddenly stopped as if it had been imprisoned. In the next moment, miserable screams reverberated, causing one scalp to go numb. The densely packed human heads were like scalding iron that was embedded into Lu Guwei's burly flesh. His body was actually corroded into pitch-black holes that were shaped like human faces. Lu Guwei felt a supreme, evil power suppressing him. His blood erupted. His will of Tao was released to the limit. He struggled like crazy, but he couldn't stop it. He couldn't resist at all. His body was burned by the heads. They disappeared piece by piece from his legs to his head. Not a trace was left. Under the witness of the war god guards and Daqin's black armor army, a divine general of Sunset Peak was wiped out. Lupi's aura vanished, and the river of the Yellow Springs was annihilated. However, a deformed human head appeared behind Qin Hao's back. It had Lupi's facial features, but it had lost its body and turned into an evil aura. Just like the other wailing human heads, Lu Pi swayed behind Qin Hao and let out shrill curses at the world. Instant kill. An imperial lord who was close to the peak of Tao was easily killed in an instant. At this moment, the impact and shock everyone felt was indescribable. This was the strength of the extreme evil power. The evil power was gathered by the dead spirits of the peak masters who had gone astray in the divine palace. Among them were countless peerless geniuses from the Seven Peaks. They were good at many methods. They gathered all methods and eventually turned them into evil power. Possessing this power was equivalent to mastering thousands of Emperor's Way rules. Whether it was the will of flame, sword, or the will of yellow spring, the evil power could be assimilated and not be affected by it. It meant that other people's rules had no effect on Qin Hao, and Qin Hao could kill them in an instant. How domineering. Because of this, Migres, Tai Wei, Yun Yi, and Daozong, the peak masters sealed the evil souls that had gone astray. Because the will of Tao and obsession were too strong, they couldn't be destroyed. They could only be suppressed. Thinking back, when Shanghua destroyed the Divine Palace, the will of Nirvana released by the Seven Peak Masters was also ineffective against him. It was because the evil power contained the same will of Tao. One move. Samma's expression was extremely ugly. Tai Wei was the same. A moment ago, Lu Gui was alive and well. But when he rushed into the storm, he was killed by Li Chuji in his peak state. No wonder Shanghua wanted to take back the evil fetus. This kind of power shouldn't exist in the mortal world. Qing Jihan's voice trembled. With the evil power, no one could defeat Qin Hao in the Emperor realm. Is he still the boss? Yi Shuihan couldn't feel the aura of the past from Qin Hao. He was panicking. Nonsense. If it wasn't for Big Brother, why were we affected by the ghostly cries just now? Sayogo replied decisively. Qin Hao's temperament had changed greatly. Even if the evil aura was overwhelming, he was still as evil as ever. Lu Gui is dead. Zhang Yan's eyelids trembled. He looked at the storm stiffly. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that Lu Gui was killed in one move. Lu Gui had become an Emperor realm. He couldn't fight back. He was too useless. Boom! A loud roar came from the horizon. The dragon spirit and Meng Xiang also collided. In the void, the red lotus tyrannical fire surged and rolled. The dragon roar shook the sky. A large amount of scales fell from the majestic body, shattering into Meng Xiang's great Tao halo. Meng Xiang's palm pressed down, becoming a huge palm with a radius of 100 miles. Emperor's light wreaked havoc. It was like an elephant foot from the 9 heavens, flattening the world. An incomparably fierce power heavily crushed the dragon spirit's body. The palm that contained the true meaning of the great Tao struck. The dragon spirit raised its fist. Its body was shrouded in the illusion of a huge dragon. Although the fist that contained the power of the meteorites rules blocked the opponent's true meaning palm, it shook the scales off its body, proving one's path and battling one's true self. Even if it opened both souls and used the meteorites' rules, it was still suppressed by the opponent. At that moment, the dragon roar in the world was incomparably fierce. The Dharma idol endured the 100 miles of palm light. Its body kept on sinking. The red lotus fire roared. The second level of the martial lord's rules burned and exploded. The Dharma idol's aura rose a second time. The surging emperor's light on its body became more and more resplendent. Its sinking body started to gradually rise. It was about to break through the opponent's suppression. And at that moment, Qin Hao just happened to kill Lu Gui. The emperor's aura of the underworld disappeared. Meng Xiang looked over and discovered there was actually another Li Chuji, a calamity sword emperor full of evil aura. Meng Xiang was momentarily dazed. How could this be? Two Li Chuji. Could it be that the person fighting against him wasn't Li Chuji himself? If it wasn't him, then what was he suppressing under his palm? An emperor clone? However, the increasingly powerful aura gradually made Meng Xiang feel pressure. The battle strength of the two sides started to close in. Chapter 1806. The demonic storm was still growing. Endless airflow gathered here, and the demonic was extremely strong. As time passed, the airflow became less and less, and the storm was not as fierce as before. It seemed to be about to stop, indicating that Zhou Wudao's Demon King succession ceremony was about to be completed. At this time, Meng Xiang stepped forward, and his body disappeared into thin air. A terrifying will of the emperor escaped into the space and quickly approached the storm, relying on the former to kill without mercy. Li Chuji's arrogant words and Lu Gui's death angered him. Buzz! The space shook. Qin Hao's evil eyes dimmed, and he naturally caught Meng Xiang's emperor qi. He then stared at a certain direction, and all the evil qi around him surged over, forming an evil cage to suppress it. Roar! Meng Xiang's roar came from the space. Intense emperor light erupted in the cage, and the evil qi collapsed immediately, revealing Meng Xiang's true body. He continued to move forward, unstoppable. Just like how Qin Hao had broken through in front of him before, he was going to pass him now. The evil light on Qin Hao's body shone brightly, and endless evil power gathered in the center of his fist. He punched out in the air, trying to stop Meng Xiang. Meng Xiang raised his powerful arm, and his fist also blasted toward Qin Hao. The two terrifying fist auras collided fiercely, and the impact of the evil power and the will of the true self-path turned into a layer of shocking light wave that spread out like a ruthless blade. Wherever it passed, everything was cut in half. The 6 demon god thrones were cut in half, and the mountains in the distance were all cut in half. Countless people fled in panic. This power was unstoppable. You can't get past me. Qin Hao's body continued to rise as the evil spirits behind him swayed. He pointed his finger forward, and the dense evil spirits drowned out the sky, turning into a tidal wave as the deformed human heads lunged towards Qi Xiang to devour it. Lu Gui was killed by this attack. Meng Xiang's eyes were serious. His 10 rings burst with brilliant emperor light, and the will of the great path flowed through his body. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and pulled with all his strength. Suddenly, countless golden divine elephants radiated with him as the center, crushing the void and colliding with the evil spirits. The deformed heads were annihilated by the overwhelming might of the elephants, and at the same time, the golden elephants kept disappearing and being eaten by the evil spirits. Sama didn't know what to say. Li Chuji can actually fight Meng Xiang to a standstill. He is a true great emperor of true self, comparable to the great ancestors of the East Continent, Tai Hui said. Tai Hui's heart trembled. There was no suppression. From this moment on, the battle strength of both sides had reached a true balance. Currently, no one had the slightest advantage. After that, the sound of a flute rang out, transforming into a song of the Grand Tao of Frenzy. As the notes danced, illusory figures of frenzied devils appeared in the sky, lunging towards the war gods. It was Su Jin of the Yaowang Peak. He played the demonic, chaotic divine song. Not only that, Xiaogua, Yishui Han, Qin Yun, Aku, Chen Wanqin, and Zhang Yi all stood around Su Jin. With him as the center, they formed a small battle formation. Although there were few people, they gave off the aura of a magnificent army. Ridiculous. With less than 10 people, you want to stop nearly 100 war gods of the Sunset Peak? Tai Hui mocked. Just watch. Whoever moves is a coward. Shou Wuk replied. Less than 10 people against 100 war god guards. Was it ridiculous? It was indeed a little ridiculous. It might seem stupid, but Xiaogua and the others weren't as weak as Tai Hui thought. After all, any one of them could fight against 3 people alone. When they gathered together, it wasn't as simple as fighting against 3 people, because they were all monsters cultivated by the Divine Palace. Yaowang Peak, Daozong Peak, Mizar Peak, and Xintian Peak. You want to stop 100 people? Qingjihan watched calmly. Of course, she knew how powerful Su Jin, Tiougua and the others were. After all, they had cultivated together with her. But how could those who cultivated with the first princess of the East Continent be weak? Having said that, it wasn't easy for Su Jin and the others to successfully stop nearly 100 war god guards. Although most of the war god guards were at the peak of the Renhuang realm, and Emperor Yuan was only a minority, it was still very difficult. How could the war god guards cultivated by the Sunset Peak be mediocre? In this battle, someone among Su Jin and the others might die. Just resist for a while and restrain them. Xiaohua protect the left wing, Big Brother Yun the right wing. Wanqin and Shui Han release large-scale emperor techniques. Aku protects Su Jin. Zhang Yi took down the tyrant blade from his shoulder and stood proudly at the front of the team. In terms of Dao-proving cultivation, Su Jin was the highest. But compared to the offensive power of the great Dao, Zhang Yi came from the Mizar Peak and received the true teachings of the Mizar Battle Venerable. After all, besides Su Jin, Zhang Yi was the second strongest person in the team. Boom! Emperor Intent erupted, and the Nine Palace War Emperor art was activated. Zhang Ye's body spewed out intense emperor light, and his aura was extremely domineering, just like the Mizar Battle Venerable. Immediately, a blade slashed towards the war god guards. Blade energy rolled and roared like a wave of the great Tao, engulfing everything. At this time, he naturally couldn't hold back any longer. It couldn't be helped even if he exposed himself. When he finished speaking, he grabbed at the void, and the purple-gold divine dragon abandoned the Dojan body and returned. It absorbed the purple-gold divine dragon's soul into the body and merged with the divine spirit. Suddenly, this cultivator's appearance changed drastically. Phosphorescent light flickered all over his body, and he looked a bit like Qin Hao when he was in his dragon form. However, their auras were completely different. He stepped into the air and soared into the sky like a real divine dragon. In the next moment, terrifying Emperor's Path light waves erupted high in the sky, as if doomsday had arrived. Zhang Yi held back an 8-stage Dao-proving realm cultivator. At the same time, the rest of the war god guards continued to move forward. Demonic spirits danced wildly in the sky, and the trembling music seriously affected their minds. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that several powerful cultivators blocked the music with their emperor's will, at least half of the war god guards wouldn't have been able to move forward. "I'll go and kill him," an old man in a green robe said with a serious face to the two cultivators beside him. The disturbance of the music was too strong. If one's level was not high enough to resist it, it was very likely that one would be controlled by the music. They had to kill Su Jin as soon as possible. The elder swept through the air, and his figure was extremely fast. He was like a streak of green light that couldn't be captured. However, just as he approached Su Jin's group, a figure suddenly flew out from behind Su Jin. It was a burly man with dark skin. This burly man's clothes burst open, and 9 terrifying dragon heads extended from his flesh. One of the dragon heads took the opportunity to bite the elder. With a ferocious impact, Jiu Ying and the elder disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a painful cry that reverberated in the air. An ancient true dragon? Among the war god guards, a middle-aged man with 2 axes on his back was shocked. It was as if he couldn't believe his eyes. Was that huge creature that swept away the green robe a living true dragon? There was actually a true dragon under Li Chuji's command. It seemed that the followers of Dinda's descendants were not simple. First, Su Jin's music sealed the void and seemed to be able to take away people's souls, which had a huge impact on the war god guards. Then, the Saber Emperor, who was in the 6th tier of the Tao realm, blocked the purple-robed revered dragon. At this moment, an ancient true dragon had appeared and suddenly swept away the Dark Emperor in the green robe. Even without Li Chuji's deterrence, it would not be so easy for the war god guards to cross this line of defense. "Fu Kuang, you go and do it." His body was faintly trembling with a layer of sonic light. This layer of sonic light radiated outwards and enveloped the huge formation of the war god guards.